Chapter 346. This bit of true spiritual light was the only innate item in the body of a postnatal life form. If a postnatal life form wanted to go against postnatal and become innate, prove the supreme great Tao, and cultivate into the immortal Daluo Jingxian, they could only rely on this bit of true spiritual light. This was the foundation of their Tao. The essence of the Tao of Godfiends was to constantly strengthen this bit of true spiritual light, so that it could transform into a Tao body and transform into a Khanate Godfiend. Of course, the incarnation that Feng Zichen wanted to refine couldn't be a postnatal life form. If he wanted to refine a postnatal life form incarnation, he could directly use blood essence. It wouldn't be so troublesome. The incarnation that he wanted to refine was not something a Khanate Godfiend dared to hope for, but it had to be at least a top-level Khanate life form. Khanate Godfiends were great creatures created by heaven and earth. Each of them was a seed of Daluo Jingxian. As long as nothing unexpected happened, they were destined to become Daluo Taoist priests. With Feng Zichen's strength, Daluo Jingxian couldn't create a Khanate Godfiend. Even if a saint wanted to create such a great creature, it would be extremely difficult. He would have to pay a considerable price. Therefore, he could only use his strongest method to refine a top-level Khanate life-form incarnation. In fact, it wasn't that difficult to refine a Khanate Godfiend incarnation. Now, there was an opportunity in front of Feng Zichen. It was just that he wasn't willing. In the Netherworld Blood Sea, there were countless fragments of true spirits floating. If Feng Zichen could steal his heart and melt these true spirits, he didn't even need all of them. Just a small part of them could be refined into a Khanate Godfiend incarnation. However, this move was too harmful to the harmony of heaven. If he really did it, he would definitely be entangled with endless negative karma and attract divine punishment. Think about it, these true spirits were originally quietly staying in the Blood Sea, waiting for the cycle of reincarnation to open so that they could start a new life and start over. In the future, if they were fated, these true spirits that reincarnated could become golden immortals. They might be able to understand their previous selves and recall the past. However, if Feng Zichen refined them, they would really disappear from the untainted land. Reincarnation or starting over would have nothing to do with them. It had completely disappeared. Not a single trace of it remained. He couldn't imagine how big of a sin this was. The heavenly Tao would definitely be enraged and send down heavenly punishment. Of course, Feng Zichen had experienced heavenly punishment many times and had experience. In addition, he had a lot of merit on him. A mere heavenly punishment would not scare him. Most importantly, he couldn't bear it. Why would Feng Zichen attack these innocent true spirits for an innate Godfiend avatar if there was no grudge between them? This was not in accordance with the heavenly Tao. It was also contrary to his original intention. Therefore, I won't do it. Even if Feng Zichen managed to refine an incarnation using this method, his Tao heart would be flawed, and he would not be able to achieve the state of fusion. In that case, he would completely lose the hope of breaking through to the primordial chaos Tao realm. He would have no fate with the great Tao in this life. Moreover, slaughtering billions of innocent people for his own selfish reasons was the demonic Tao. Everyone in the untainted land had the right to kill him. If Feng Zichen really did that, Nuwa would be the first to not let him off, let alone the other saints. No matter how fierce the demonic Tao was, they would not lay their hands on true spirits. No matter how ferocious a devil was, he would not be able to refine someone else's true spirit. Refining true spirits was the common evil of the untainted land. It was a taboo in the world. No matter how intense the battle was or how great the hatred was, the most one could do was to shatter the opponent's true spirit into pieces, completely erase its intelligence and scatter it into the world, cutting off all chances of resurrection. No one had ever heard of anyone refining someone else's true spirit. Otherwise, with so many true spirits in the Blood Sea, Taoist Mingi would have taken action long ago. Why would he have stayed until now? Wasn't it good to use these true spirits to create Azura clansmen of the innate Godfiend level? Why did he need to enlighten them one by one? It was so troublesome. It was not that he was unwilling, but he could not. Now, reincarnation had yet to be established. If new living beings were to be born in the primordial world, they could only be born through the spontaneous nurturing of the world. However, nurturing living beings required the consumption of the essence of the world. Even if the world did not care about these essences, nurturing innate true spirits and giving birth to true living beings required a long process. In the primordial world, it was extremely chaotic. Living beings were dying all the time. Moreover, this speed was definitely faster than the speed at which living beings were born in the primordial world. According to this, there should be fewer and fewer living beings in the primordial world. However, the truth was that there were more and more living beings in the primordial world. The reason was those innate true spirits. When an innate God fiend died and his innate true spirit was shattered, 129,600 innate life forms could be born. When an innate life form died and his true spirit was shattered, 129,600 postnatal life forms could be born. And these were only at the initial stage of their birth. If the innate God fiends were stronger and their innate true spirits were shattered, more innate life forms could be born. It was because of these shattered innate true spirits that there were more and more innate life forms in the primordial world. Of course, the number of innate God fiends was also decreasing. If one had studied the history of the primordial world, they would discover that after every calamity, a large number of living beings would be born in the primordial world. That was because too many experts had died in the cataclysm. Moreover, the aptitude of these born innate life forms was weaker with each generation. After the primordial beast calamity, most of the living beings born in the world were innate God fiends. Most of the 3,000 mortal guests of the Purple Cloud Palace were born during this period. Only a small number of living beings were innate life forms, and they were the top innate life forms. After the ancient Longhan calamity, most of the living beings born in the world were innate life forms. Only a small number of living beings were innate God fiends. The top disciples of the third generation of the celestial sect of wonders were the products of this era. Then, after the shaman demon calamity, most of the living beings born in the world were postnatal life forms. Only a small number of living beings were innate life forms. After all, at this time the primordial world had undergone a huge change. It had changed from the innate era to the postnatal era. However, the postnatal life forms of this era had decent aptitude. Any one of them had the possibility of becoming an immortal. After the investiture of the gods' calamity, the innate era had completely transformed into the postnatal era. The living beings born in the world were only postnatal life forms. Only those top grotto heavens and blessed lands with endless fortune could give birth to innate life forms. The postnatal life forms of this era were affected by the environment. Their aptitude was undoubtedly much weaker. Any one of them could only be said to have the possibility of cultivating. As for becoming an immortal, it depended on one's own fortune. Chapter 347. After the journey to the West calamity, the world had completely changed. The Khanate era had long become a myth, and the living beings that were born had completely become ordinary people. Not to mention cultivating the path of immortality, even those who had the talent to cultivate were 1 in a million. The primordial world had always been moving backwards. In the blink of an eye, 100 years had passed. On this day, Feng Zichen finally completed the condensation of the origin of heaven and earth. There was a ball of yellow Tao light in his hand. It was dazzling and emitted the aura of the origin of all things. The sky was black and the earth was yellow. Yellow was the color of heaven and earth. This was the origin of heaven and earth. Feng Zichen spent 100 years to complete it. Go. Pointing at his forehead, Feng Zichen pulled out a stream of qi of true spirit and injected it into the origin of heaven and earth. In the end it was Daluo Jingxian. It was different from before. To refine an incarnation, a stream of qi of true spirit was enough. There was no need to split the Khanate true spirit. The function of this stream of qi of true spirit was to imprint his own mark on the origin of heaven and earth to ensure that the Khanate true spirit evolved from it was his incarnation and not an independent life. Otherwise, it would be a real joke if he did not refine the incarnation and had an extra child for no reason. After the qi of true spirit and the origin of heaven and earth had perfectly merged, Feng Zichen began to evolve the Khanate true spirit. He still knew how to create life. Among the 36 great divine powers of the Big Dipper, the supreme great divine power of mediating creation had the power to create life. Evolving the universe and creating life was a great divine power that could create something out of nothing. In the past, Nuwa had used this divine power to create the human race. Feng Zichen had practiced the Big Dipper 36 transformations for many years. Of course, he was not unfamiliar with this divine power. It should be said that he was familiar with the 36 supreme great divine powers recorded in the Big Dipper 36 transformations. Mediating creation. Feng Zichen formed a Tao seal and chanted a Tao voice, attracting the power from the unseen world. With the help of his hand gestures, he unleashed this earth-shattering great divine ability. Although Feng Zichen could perform it, his realm was not as high as Nuwa's, so he could not perform it as he wished. It could only be activated with a Tao seal and an incantation. With the completion of Feng Zichen's hand gesture, the void suddenly changed as if it had collapsed and huge cracks appeared. Divine light appeared. Then, from the crack, the qi of creation surged out and wrapped around the origin of heaven and earth. Star River Universal Light, rise. Seeing this, Feng Zichen quickly used another supreme technique, the Milky Way cosmic light. This was a supreme technique that he had comprehended from Zhouxing. It was a great technique that belonged to the way of time and space, and it had the ability to control time and space. With Feng Zichen's mastery of the mediating creation, if he wanted to rely on it to create living beings, it would take at least 100 years or even a few thousand years. This period of time was too long. Therefore, Feng Zichen used the Milky Way cosmic light to forcibly accelerate time and mature the origin of heaven and earth. A wisp of purple gold light appeared, with the aura of time, enveloping the origin of heaven and earth and the chi of creation. In an instant, the sea turned into mulberry fields and endless years passed. It seemed like tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years. The origin of heaven and earth and the chi of creation merged and turned into a divine fetus with the aura of life. At first, it was weak, then it became stronger and stronger. In the end, the divine fetus exploded, and a connate true spirit emerged from it. It had the outline of a human, and its whole body was white and flawless, surrounded by divine light. This was a connate life form, just as Feng Zichen thought, the top connate life form. However, this incarnation did not have a physical body, and was only a connate true spirit. It was also because of this that he could be created by Feng Zichen in such a short period of time with a ball of origin of heaven and earth. Otherwise, how could a complete top-level Xiantian life form be created by a mere ball of the origin of heaven and earth? Of course, this incarnation did not need a physical body. It was a ghost. And it was the most basic ghost. Why would it need a physical body? A ghost body was enough. Fengdu greets me. With a flash of spiritual light, this incarnation gained sentience and understood its origins. Haha. You and I are one. There's no need to be so polite. As they spoke, the two of them looked at each other and laughed in unison. It was amazing to have two bodies at the same time. From this moment on, Feng Zichen had another nickname in the primordial world. The supreme deity of the netherworld, the Bayin Ghost Emperor, the Lord of the Netherworld, the King of Hell, and the Emperor of Fengdu who commanded all ghosts. Dong, a long bell rang. Hongming Daozhong came from the North Star and landed between the two of them. Boundless Taoist rhymes spread out, and Hongming's aura spread out. In this sea of blood, a hazy purple Tao domain was formed. Inside, 3,000 great Taoists manifested. They intertwined with each other and deduced endless laws. All the principles of the world could be found in it. During the trip to the great chaos of the outer realm, although the Hongming Daozhong did not advance to a connate cardinal treasure, it had been baptized by the power of the great Tao and had improved slightly. This purple Tao domain was the result of its improvement. Tao domain, great Tao domain. Inside it was filled with the laws of the great Tao. It could help one cultivate, deduce divine abilities and perfect cultivation techniques. It was a first-class holy land for enlightenment. The incarnation of the ghost Tao had been born. Next, it was to establish the ghost Tao and create a ghost cultivation technique. Therefore, Feng Zichen wanted to use the power of Hongming Daozhong to improve his comprehension so that he could create the ghost cultivation technique that was closest to perfection. Ghosts were beings of extreme yin. In the later generations, true ghost cultivators relied on absorbing starlight and moonlight to cultivate in the early stages of cultivation. Therefore, Feng Zichen planned to create the ghost cultivation technique from there. When it came to the Tao of the stars, he was the true expert. Even Di Juntai was inferior. Firstly, the two of them did not receive the three enclosures Tao scripture. Secondly, compared to the Emperor star, the Sun star was closer to the Tao of the Sun. In terms of the Tao of the stars, it was far less orthodox than the Emperor star. Thirdly, Di Juntai did not have the inheritance of the star demon god. In terms of the Tao of the stars, he was not as deep as Feng Zichen. From this, it could be seen that in the primordial world, Feng Zichen's comprehension of the Tao of the stars could be said to be number one. At the very least, he had attained the Tao of the stars. As the Tao master of the stars, Di Jun did not notice. Wasn't this the embodiment of Di Jun's inferiority? Creating the ghost Tao was not difficult for Feng Zichen. The ghosts now were the innate true spirits. And the Tao of the gods and demons was the method to cultivate the innate true spirits. The Yin God and Yang God concepts inside were very suitable for the ghost Tao. If he took it out and changed it, he would not change the cultivation of the true spirit. Then, he would change the physical body into the primordial spirit. It would be almost a ghost cultivation technique. It had to be said that this ghost Tao was really fated with Feng Zichen. Back then, when he created the Tao of the gods and demons, he did not expect that this cultivation technique could be used as a ghost cultivation technique. Chapter 348. Who could say for sure when it came to fated opportunities? After entering the purple precept domain, Feng Zichen flashed and entered the body of Fengdu's incarnation. He merged with it and disappeared. The Great Emperor of Fengdu was the incarnation of Great Emperor Ziwei in the Netherworld. Although no one knew now, when Great Emperor Ziwei appeared in the future, all living beings in the primordial world would know. If people found out that Feng Zichen and the Great Emperor of Fengdu were together, it would inevitably cause others to suspect their relationship. This was not good. The relationship between Feng Zichen and Great Emperor Ziwei could not be exposed. Great Emperor Ziwei was Great Emperor Ziwei, and Feng Zichen was Feng Zichen. These were two completely different people with different experiences and different destinies. They had no relationship at all and could not be involved in any way. This was related to Feng Zichen's future plan, so he could not be careless in the slightest. Therefore, he would not do anything that might expose the true identity of Great Emperor Ziwei. Even if he did do it, he had to be extremely cautious and erase all traces afterward. The Great Emperor of Fengdu and Great Emperor Ziwei were involved. Therefore, without a suitable reason, Feng Zichen could not let others see the connection between them. Compared to Feng Zichen's strength, Fengdu's strength was too weak. He had only reached the innate realm. This was the second realm of cultivation, and it was also the lowest level among innate life forms. It was only higher than the acquired realm, which was unique to postnatal life forms. Of course, this was deliberately done by Feng Zichen. Otherwise, as the top innate life form, Fengdu's strength should have at least the cultivation of a celestial immortal. If he wanted to open up a new great path, of course he had to start from the most basic realm and feel every realm again. If he had not experienced it personally, how could he open up the most perfect cultivation method? Therefore, Fengdu's initial realm was only the innate realm. It was convenient for him to use every realm to verify the method of ghost cultivation. As for why it was not the acquired realm, that was because Fengdu was an innate life form. And the weakest innate life form had the cultivation of the innate realm. This was the bottom line of innate life forms. The essence was so and could not be changed. As Feng Zichen's mind was completely immersed in the derivation of the cultivation technique, the purple Tao domain also quieted down without any sound. Just like that, another 100 years passed. On this day, Feng Zichen, who had been silent for 100 years, suddenly moved. 3 rays of light gushed out of his body. The first ray of light was the light of life, which originated from its mother. If one lived in a human body for a long time, it could make one feel refreshed and live longer. After it appeared, it immediately fused with the 9 heavens yang qi and turned into a ball of gas. This was the fetal light, the heaven soul of the 3 souls of heaven, earth, and man. It ruled over a person's lifespan. The second ray of light was the light of wisdom, which originated from its father. It caused man to scheme against all living things, to toil 100 deities, and to bring about disaster. After it appeared, it directly merged with the 5 elements qi in the world and turned into a ball of gas. This was Shuangling, the human soul of the 3 souls of heaven, earth, and man. It determined a person's wisdom and ability. The third ray of light was the light of disaster. It caused people to be lustful and addicted to dirty thoughts. It consumed their essence, caused them to lack divine qi, insufficient kidney qi, and blocked the 5 meridians of the spleen and stomach. After it appeared, it directly merged with the extreme yin qi in the world and turned into a ball of gas. This was the netherworld spirit, the earth soul of the 3 souls of heaven, earth, and man. It controlled the gonads and sexual orientation of the human body. After the 3 souls of heaven, earth, and man were born, they suddenly merged into one and turned into a huge ball of gas, enveloping Feng Zichen's body. Outside his body, it was constantly changing as if it was about to turn into a human form. However, it seemed to be missing something. Every time the human form was about to condense, the ball of gas formed by the 3 souls would shatter and scatter into a ball. Then, it would condense again, try to turn into a human form again, and shatter again. It would condense again and shatter again. The cycle repeated. Ha! With a deep shout, emotions surged on Feng Zichen's body. There were joy, anger, sorrow, fear, love, evil, and desire. 7 emotions appeared and evolved outside his body, fusing with the 3 souls. These were the 7 souls: corpse dog, concealed arrow, sparrow een, thief seizing, non-poison, filth removal, and smelly lung. They were formed by human emotions. The 7 souls appeared and immediately merged with the 3 souls. Immediately, the 3 souls stabilized and formed an illusory figure outside Feng Zichen's body. It looked exactly like him. This was a soul. Feng Zichen relied on the knowledge of the later generations to refine a fetal coat outside the connate true spirit, which was what the later generations called the soul. It was used to protect the true spirit. Rumble. As soon as the soul was formed, the heavenly Tao immediately sensed it and lowered its gaze. The rules of heaven and earth appeared, and auspicious clouds spread out. The scene of the clear saint appeared, tearing a hole in the resentment that had not dissipated all year round above the blood sea. The soul was something that had never appeared before. In the current primordial world, the fetal coat used to protect the Kane true spirit was the primordial spirit. Compared to the soul, it was more high-end, more powerful, and more perfect. However, although the primordial spirit was good, it had a flaw. That was, only cultivators who had become immortals could refine the primordial spirit. There were no cultivators below the heaven immortal realm. The primordial spirit was unique to immortal cultivators. The soul was the opposite. It was prepared for those who had not become immortals or even mortals. Strictly speaking, the yin spirit and the yang spirit were also a type of soul. It was a special change in the process of the soul transforming into the primordial spirit. The essence was still the soul. The appearance of the soul could be said to make up for the shortcomings of the primordial world. Therefore the heavenly Tao was alarmed. Supreme majesty shrouded the blood sea, and the vast aura was terrifying. Taoist Mingi, who was in seclusion, was immediately awakened by this aura. Who is he? Opening his eyes, Taoist Mingi immediately discovered the source of the change. He narrowed his eyes and looked in the direction of Feng Zichen. What? How can this be? In the next moment when he saw Feng Zichen, Taoist Mingi could not help but narrow his eyes and cry out in surprise. In his tone there was half doubt and half shock. Because he could not see through that person at all. This sounded a little unbelievable, but it really happened. One had to know that Taoist Mingi was in existence in the great perfection of sage to be. In the primordial world there were not many people that he could not see through. Moreover, he knew all these people. However, he had no impression of this person in front of him. It was as if he had appeared out of thin air. Strange, really strange. In his eyes, that person was standing quietly on the blood sea. His entire body was covered by a dazzling purple light. He could not see through his depth, nor could he figure out his origin. He was mysterious and unpredictable. As for the Hongmeng Daozhong, the moment the three souls were born, the Hongmeng Daozhong had been kept by Feng Zichen. This treasure was too eye-catching. It could not be seen by outsiders. Chapter 349. Of course, Taoist Mingi couldn't see through Feng Zichen. Outside his body, it was the merit of opening the heavens. It was a supreme treasure that could allow one to become a sage. It was enough to cover all traces. Even if a sage came, he could only recognize the origin of the merit of creation. And he couldn't see Feng Zichen through him. Although Taoist Mingi was strong, he was still quite a distance away from the primordial chaos Tao realm. Therefore, he couldn't see through the cover of the merit of creation. It wasn't that he was weak, but that the merit of creation was too strong. Since a sacred object was called a sacred object, it naturally had the ability to defy the heavens. Otherwise, how could it attract the pursuit of countless living beings? Boom! An invisible force erupted, and in an instant, it swept through the entire primordial chaos. This was, the heavenly Tao had made its move. Only the heavenly Tao could release a power that could affect the entire primordial chaos in an instant. When the invisible force brushed past, all the living beings in the primordial chaos who had yet to become an immortal felt a wonderful change in their bodies. The light of spirituality appeared and combined with the qi of yin and yang and the five elements. Together with the qi of the seven emotions, it formed a fetal coat on the body of the innate true spirit. That was the soul. At this moment, all the living beings in the primordial chaos who had yet to become an immortal had a soul. The innate flaw was completely made up for. Immediately, a feeling of perfection appeared on those living beings. It was as if the birth of a soul had made them even more perfect. A sense of joy surged from the innate true spirit, causing those living beings who had given birth to souls to smile uncontrollably. In this atmosphere, even the world seemed to be infected. The entire primordial chaos was filled with an aura of joy. Whoosh! Golden light was like rain, dazzling and resplendent. It descended from the sky and fell into Feng Zichen's body. When the soul came out, the merit would descend. Feng Zichen made up for the deficiencies of the living beings in the primordial chaos. This was a matter of great merit, so naturally, great merit would descend. This time, in the face of such a huge amount of merit, Feng Zichen didn't refuse. Instead, he circulated his cultivation technique and absorbed all of it to improve his strength. The netherworld was about to appear. If one wanted to establish a foothold in it, it wasn't enough to rely on identity and qualifications. One also had to have great strength. Otherwise, no one would be convinced. Just like Hao Yin in the future, he had supreme status but no corresponding strength. In the end, he could only be reduced to a puppet. If Di Jun lost the throne, the living beings of the primordial world would still respect him. Because he was strong enough, no one dared to disrespect him. However, if Hao Yin were to lose his throne, all his glory would disappear along with it. Because compared to Di Jun, he was too weak. It was far inferior to his greatness. In the end, the great desolate Yin was a place where strength mattered. The prerequisite for seniority was equal in strength. How could Daluo Jingxian compare seniority with Tai Jingxian? Their life forms had changed and they were no longer the same creatures. Their understanding of things and the meaning of existence were also different. All the comparisons were meaningless now. The difference between them was like the difference between humans and animals. Under such circumstances, seniority was important. Was that even possible? As the merit entered his body, Feng Zichen's realm was soaring. Earth immortal, heaven immortal, mystic immortal. In the blink of an eye, his realm had reached Tai Jingxian and it was still increasing. If he relied on himself to cultivate, it would take at least tens of thousands of years. But now, with the help of merit, he did it in a few breaths. The black-yellow merit was worthy of being a treasure to increase one's cultivation. Of course, this was also related to Feng Zichen's realm, which was Daluo Jingxian. Otherwise, no matter how fast merit could increase one's cultivation, it couldn't be so fast. And with the increase of his realm, Feng Zichen's body also underwent a huge change. Light spots suddenly lit up on his soul. After counting carefully, there were a total of 365 light spots. They seemed to correspond to the stars in the sky, and also seemed to correspond to the spirit cave of the earth. Panga's meridian diagram. Feng Zichen used his soul to replace his physical body, modified the God-Fiend scripture, and created the supreme scripture of the ghost cultivators, the Ghost Code. The God-Fiend Tao was to open up the divine aperture in the physical body, evolve the Panga's meridian diagram, and reverse-engineer the Panga's Tao body to strengthen the true spirit. The Ghost Tao was to open up the ghost aperture in the soul and evolve a Panga's meridian diagram. This was reverse-engineering the Panga's primordial spirit. Ghosts didn't have a physical body, so they didn't need a physical body. They directly refined an innate primordial spirit. In the end, they directly reversed everything and formed the Panga's primordial spirit. With this, they broke into the primordial chaos Tao realm and became indestructible. This was a technique that was completely different from the God-Fiend Tao. Could be said that the Ghost Tao and the God-Fiend Tao were two extremes. One completely abandoned the primordial spirit and focused on cultivating the physical body in order to cultivate the Panga's true body and complete the magnificent feat of using strength to achieve the Tao. The other completely abandoned the physical body and focused on cultivating the primordial spirit in order to cultivate the Panga's primordial spirit and combine the Tao of heaven and earth to achieve the Tao. Of course, the two also had something in common, and that was that they were both based on the true spirit. The true spirit was the foundation. The physical body and primordial spirit served the true spirit. Opportunity. A great opportunity. Without a doubt, if he could reverse engineer the Panga's primordial spirit, it would make up for Feng Zichen's biggest shortcoming. Feng Zichen didn't have a primordial spirit. His true spirit was too powerful, causing no primordial spirit to be able to withstand the power of the true spirit. Not to mention wrapping the true spirit, if one wanted to get close, they would be crushed into pieces by the powerful power of the true spirit. This was also what Feng Zichen was proud of. There was no other true spirit as powerful as him in the primordial world. However, pride was pride, it didn't mean that there was no problem. The physical body, primordial spirit, and true spirit complemented each other. If one was missing, it wouldn't be so coordinated. Although he couldn't see any problems now, there might be problems in the future. He had to guard against this. However, no matter how hard Feng Zichen tried, he couldn't refine a suitable primordial spirit. There was one in the past, but that innate primordial spirit was sent into the Thunder-Locked Tao fetus and turned into the North Star Emperor. Even if he took it back now, it had been out of his body for so long that it probably wouldn't be able to adapt to the power of the true spirit. Now, the birth of the Ghost Tao had completely solved his problem. In this world, was there still a primordial spirit stronger than Panga's primordial spirit? No. Moreover, his goal was Panga's true body, which was the most compatible with Panga's primordial spirit. When Panga's true body and Panga's primordial spirit were all refined, achieving the Tao would be easy. The human incarnation mainly cultivated the physical body, while the Ghost Tao incarnation mainly cultivated the primordial spirit. The comprehension of the two would be gathered on the original body of the Emperor Star. The benefits obtained would definitely be beyond imagination. This was the true great Tao that could be expected. The gains obtained from this trip to the Blood Sea completely exceeded Feng Zichen's expectations. Just the benefits obtained from opening up the Ghost Tao were enough for him to enjoy for the rest of his life. Chapter 350. Even if he didn't get any benefits in the next cycle of reincarnation, it would be a worthwhile trip. The benefits were not as important as the completion of his own path. The 365 ghost apertures opened at the same time and connected into one. They emitted a powerful suction force, swallowing the essence of the stars and the extreme yin qi of the earth. Rumble. Amidst the rumbling, Feng Zichen's body shook violently. The illusory ghost body was immediately fixed. It seemed to have a texture. The yin spirit was formed. Then the changes did not stop. With the help of the qi of merit, all the ghost apertures were filled with yin qi in an instant. In the next moment, extreme yin gave birth to yang. First, a wisp of pure yang qi appeared and then spread throughout his body. With a sizzling sound, the yin qi on the yin spirit's body was refined and turned into pure yang qi. The yang spirit was formed. Without hesitation, Feng Zichen silently operated the three pure Taoist scriptures and extracted the principles of Pangu's primordial spirit and imprinted them on the yang spirit. He made the yang spirit as close to Pangu's primordial spirit as possible. The three pure ones were formed by Pangu's primordial spirit. The Taoist scriptures they created naturally contained part of the principles of Pangu's primordial spirit. With this, he might be able to see a trace of the mysteries of Pangu's primordial spirit. Boom. 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 A total of 108 bolts of golden lightning struck down on Feng Zichen's yang spirit. This was a heavenly tribulation. There was originally no heavenly tribulation in the current primordial world. However, under Feng Zichen's series of actions, a heavenly tribulation was born. Moreover, the current heavenly tribulation was more powerful than the heavenly tribulation in the future. Of course, not everyone was qualified to undergo such a powerful heavenly tribulation. Only those with heaven-defying aptitude could pass it. This was a heavenly tribulation specially prepared for people like Feng Zichen. As the three pure Taoist scriptures were operated, no matter how powerful the heavenly tribulation was, it could not hurt him at all. Instead, it was refined by him and turned into nutrients for his growth. In the end, he had Daluo Jinxian's cultivation. If he was injured by the heavenly tribulation, he would lose a lot of face. After the heavenly tribulation, Feng Zichen became a celestial immortal, and his yang spirit turned into a primordial spirit. At this point, the primordial spirit could already produce flesh and blood. Apart from not being as strong as the physical body, there was no difference. It even had many more mysterious abilities. After becoming a sky immortal, Feng Zichen's speed of refining merit points had greatly increased. Within a few breaths, he completed the process of becoming one with the Tao and became a Tai Jingxian. Moreover, he was in the consummation realm. At the same time, his merit was also exhausted. He did not raise his cultivation level to that of Daluo Jingxian. However, this was not the end. Feng Zichen suddenly stood up, bowed to the sky and said, "In the name of the heavenly way," the poor way of Fengdu saw that in the nether blood sea, countless true spirits had gathered. They did not have spiritual wisdom, did not understand the heavenly way and did not know the true self. They suffered day and night from the erosion of evil energy. I could not bear it. Therefore, I specially set up the ghost path to pass on the method of ghost cultivation. I will open the path for the dead so that they can enter the door of the great way again and free the billions of true spirits. May the heavenly way be the judge. Ghost path set up. As he spoke, Feng Zichen sat down cross-legged and began to talk about the method of ghost cultivation. His voice was so loud that it spread throughout the blood sea. All living beings must die and the dead must return to the earth. This is called a ghost. A ghost is a soul. It has 3 souls and 7 spirits. 3 souls, fetus light Shuangling and Yujing. 7 spirits, corpse dog, concealed arrow, sparrow een, seizing thief, non-poison, filth removal and smelly lung. Following Feng Zichen's narration, the true spirits in the blood sea seemed to be enlightened. A wisp of light of wisdom appeared, and they gradually developed spiritual intelligence. To be able to persist in the blood sea for so long without being eroded by the evil aura, their cultivation when they were alive was definitely not to be underestimated. Therefore, after they obtained the method of cultivation with the help of it, they all developed spiritual intelligence again. After these people developed spiritual intelligence, they first bowed to Feng Zichen. Then they hurriedly followed the method of ghost cultivation that Feng Zichen passed down to condense their 3 souls and 7 spirits. They had already formed a soul, and they continued to cultivate the ghost code. Only after losing something would one know how to cherish it. They had already died once. Therefore they understood the value of life. This was a rare opportunity to cultivate, so he naturally cherished it very much. Every time a true spirit developed spiritual intelligence, the heavenly way would bestow merit. And when this true spirit developed spiritual intelligence and stepped on the path of Tao again, the heavenly way would bestow merit. As more and more true spirits developed spiritual intelligence, more and more true spirits embarked on the path of cultivation. Feng Zichen's merit also accumulated more and more. Endless enlightenment floated in his heart, enveloping him and rushing towards the Daoyuo realm. At the same time, the merit of splitting open the sky was also exerting its power, raising Feng Zichen's comprehension to the limit, helping him to understand the mysteries of Pangu's primordial spirit. There was a loud rumble. A bright light suddenly erupted from Feng Zichen's body. It broke through the layers of void and directly pierced through the long river of destiny, proving the Tao of Daoyuo Jingxian. At this moment, Feng Zichen once again proved the Tao of Daoyuo Jingxian, achieving the Daoyuo Jingxian with the ghost Tao. TSK. I wonder which fellow Taoist is so free and leisurely to specially split a clone and come to the Blood Sea to prove the Tao. In the depths of the Blood Sea, Taoist Mingi could be said to have witnessed the entire process of Feng Zichen's Tao proving with his own eyes. Daoyuo Jingxian, who had achieved the Tao of Daoyuo Jingxian in 100 years, Taoist Mingi would not believe that he was not the clone of some great divine ability. However, that person had covered his background, obviously wanting to expose his identity. Taoist Mingi would not ask for trouble and take the initiative to investigate the other party's background. With this fellow Taoist here, I think the Blood Sea will not be lonely. Looking at Feng Zichen, Taoist Mingi said in an inexplicable tone. If it was in the past, Feng Zichen had come to the Blood Sea to prove the Tao without saying anything, given Taoist Mingi's temper, he would definitely chase him out. However, after the battle with Tai, Taoist Mingi understood a principle. In the primordial world it was necessary to have 1 or 2 close friends. This way when he encountered trouble he could have a helper. Now that a great divine ability had taken the initiative to come over, Mingi, who was thinking of ways to make friends, could not ask for more. How could he refuse? In any case the Blood Sea was big enough. Not to mention one great divine ability, even if a few more came it could accommodate them. Furthermore, Feng Zichen's ghost Tao was still beneficial to the Blood Sea. The reason why the netherworld Blood Sea had so much resentment was because of these true spirits. Now, with the appearance of the ghost Tao, the resentment was eliminated. The situation of the Blood Sea should be improved a lot. As for the ghost Tao, other than feeling curious, Taoist Mingi did not take it to heart. He was not the only one. Many great divine abilities of the primordial world were the same. Now that the netherworld had not appeared, ghost cultivators had no foothold and had no future. The gazes of the great divine abilities were still on the living. In comparison, the primordial world belonged to the living. Dead people? What was that? They were just losers. What trouble could they cause? Chapter 351. The moment Daoyuo Jingxian proved his Tao in Fengdu, Feng Zichen's original body also changed in the Ziwei Tao embryo on the Ziwei star. Wisps of purple light appeared and wrapped around his true spirit as if they were nurturing something. It was the primordial spirit embryo. Daoyuo Jingxian proved his Tao in Fengdu. His primordial spirit already had a trace of the mysteries of Pangu's primordial spirit. Now, through the mysterious connection, that wisp of mystery was transmitted to his original body, helping him evolve his innate primordial spirit. The Ziwei star was formed by Pangu's ancestral aperture. It was where his divine court was located, where his primordial spirit lived, and also the former residence of the heavenly Tao. It could be said that the Ziwei star was the #1 place of creation in the primordial world. Even Kunlun Mountain could not be compared to it. It was much easier to reverse engineer Pangu's primordial spirit here than in other places. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was like the heavens were helping him. When Great Emperor Ziwei's innate primordial spirit was successfully evolved, his physical body, primordial spirit, and true spirit would be perfect. That meant that it was time for him to be born. However, if Dijun's Tai did not die, even if he was born, he would not be able to walk out of the Ziwei star. Going out meant death. Of course, if Feng Zichen could fight against the entire demon race by himself, he would be able to go out. But obviously he could not. This era belonged to Dijun. The next era belonged to him. After Feng Zichen proved his Tao, the merit did not end. It was still flowing in endlessly. However, this merit was no longer enough to improve his cultivation. Therefore, Feng Zichen thought for a moment and suddenly formed a seal. He gathered the merit aura into a ball and poured it into the ground under his feet. Rumble. Amidst the violent rumbling, the surrounding earth veins surged crazily and merged with the merit aura, forming a huge mountain peak that rose from the bottom of the sea. The mountain peak was magnificent as if it was going to pierce the clouds. It rose up with a whoosh. In a few days, it was already level with the sea of blood and was about to emerge. At this moment, the seal in Feng Zichen's hand suddenly changed. The aura of virtue no longer surged towards the ground. Instead, it turned into golden flames that burned towards the mountain peak. Sizzle. Accompanied by a sizzling sound, the impurities on the mountain were refined by the fire of virtue, and they turned into wisps of black smoke that dissipated into the sea of blood. As the flames of virtue smelted the mountain, the origin of the sea of blood hidden in the blood water was unavoidably extracted by the flames of virtue and fused with the mountain. A smear of blood appeared on the mountain. Although it was very faint, it was exceptionally obvious. Furthermore, as more of the blood sea's origin fused into the mountain, the blood-red color became darker, and the mountain gradually turned blood-red. At the same time, the fire of virtue became even more vigorous. Even more impurities were refined out, and the mountain was shrinking at a visible speed. Virtue Qi was refined by the heavenly Tao with the quintessence of the heavens and the earth, and it possessed the ability to create all things. Feng Zichen had fused it into the earth veins and his goal was obvious. He wanted to create a paradise. A blessed land for ghost cultivators. Regardless of whether there was the netherworld or not, ghost cultivators needed a place to settle down. And he, Feng Zichen, the great emperor of the Bane Necropolis, the ancestor of the ghost Tao, also needed a dojo to preach the methods of ghost cultivators and control thousands of ghosts. Luoshan. Fengdu Luoshan. This was the name that Feng Zichen had given to the mountain peak, and it was also the name of his future dojo. The great emperor of the Fengdu Luoshan was in charge of the netherworld, controlling thousands of ghosts, establishing the 6 palaces of the grotto heaven, and sealing the ghosts and gods of the 6 heavens. Dojo. It seems that this fellow Taoist is really planning to settle down in the sea of blood. Then, the poor Wei will lend him a hand as a sign of goodwill. Seeing Feng Zichen's actions, Taoist Mingi naturally guessed his plan. After thinking for a while, he decided to help him develop the dojo. As long as the other party settled down in the sea of blood, he would be a natural ally. If he showed goodwill now, it would be easier to build a relationship later on. As for becoming an enemy of Taoist Mingi? What a joke. He was the lord of the Nether Blood Sea, one of the top 10 great mediums in the primordial world. Did he really think that everyone was Tai? The number of people in the primordial world who could be his enemy, other than the saints, would be less than 5. Go. Grabbing at the void, Taoist Mingi forcefully pulled out a ball of the origin of the sea of blood and threw it at Luoshan. Rumble. The origin of the sea of blood entered the body, and Luoshan's changes suddenly became intense. The mountain turned completely dark red, and evil aura flowed out. Thank you, fellow Taoist. The poor Wei has something to do, so I can't come forward to thank you. I hope you can forgive me. After stabilizing Luoshan, Feng Zichen bowed to Taoist Mingi from afar. In the sea of blood, only he could give out the origin of the sea of blood so casually. Ah. You're welcome, fellow Taoist. The matter in front of you is more important. You and I will talk later. Taoist Mingi replied with a smile. Thank you for your understanding, fellow Taoist. After replying, Feng Zichen continued to use his divine ability to transform Luoshan. After obtaining a ball of the origin of the sea of blood, Fengdu Luoshan's origin was undoubtedly more vigorous. However, Luoshan was a blessed land created after all. Compared to those blessed lands created by nature, it had more craftsmanship and less nature. It was ultimately inferior. After frowning and pondering for a while, Feng Zichen suddenly raised his right hand. Using his finger as a pen and merit as ink, he began to write on Luoshan. What he wrote was the supreme scripture of the Ghost Tao, the Ghost Codex. However, those words were extremely unfamiliar and looked sinister. They were words that had never appeared in the primordial world. Those were ghost words. Words that were born from the luck of the Ghost Tao. With the appearance of the ghost words, the merit that had begun to decrease suddenly increased again and surged toward Luoshan. At the same time, the power of heaven and earth descended and acted on Luoshan's body. Endless creation. A few days later, the power of heaven and earth and the power of merit dissipated, revealing a mountain that was 1,000,000 feet tall. It was Luo Shan. Although this mountain was not big, it looked quite imposing and did not lose to the top blessed lands of the primordial world. Feng Zichen had spent so much merit. If he could not create a top blessed land, then it would be a huge loss. This mountain is called Luo Shan. It is the training ground of the Poor Way and also the ancestral land of the ghost cultivators. From now on, anyone who is in the ghost Dao can enter this mountain to cultivate. After looking at Luo Shan, Feng Zichen suddenly turned around and said to the group of ghost cultivators. These were all his future subordinates. He had to nurture them well. As the first generation of ghost cultivators, their aptitudes were definitely the best. This was because they were all innate life forms when they were alive, and most of them were formed from the innate true spirits of the Tai Jingxian. Otherwise, they would not have been able to resist the corrosion of the Blood Sea's evil aura. With such a background, becoming a Daluo Jingxian might not be realistic, but becoming a Tai Jingxian was much easier than others. Think about it, how many innate true spirits were gathered in the netherworld Blood Sea? It was simply uncountable. This was accumulated over the endless years of the primordial world. The number was naturally far beyond imagination. Chapter 352. Among these innate true spirits, as long as 1 in 100 million, no 1 in 100 million managed to cultivate Tai Jingxian, it would be a terrifying number. In the future, the Jie sect was known as the number one force in the primordial world. The 10,000 immortals did not refer to Daluo Jingxian but Tai Jingxian. If 10,000 Tai Jingxian could have such power, then Feng Zichen's Fengdu would definitely be stronger than the Jie sect. How could a sect be compared to a Dao? Teacher is merciful. Below, the ghost cultivators hurriedly bowed and said. After being taught by Feng Zichen, it was reasonable for them to call him teacher. If not for the fact that they were afraid that Feng Zichen would be angry, they would have directly called him master. Go in. Feng Zichen waved his hand and helped the ghosts up. Thank you, teacher. The ghosts waited for a while. When they saw that Feng Zichen had no intention of accepting disciples, they were slightly disappointed. Those who could create their own Dao were definitely the top experts in the primordial world. The ghosts were not fools. Naturally, they knew that there would be great benefits if they became the disciples of such a person. Unfortunately, he had no intention of accepting disciples. However, it was also good to be able to enter Luo Mountain to cultivate. This was their teacher's Dao field. If there was an opportunity in the future, they might be able to become his disciple. With this thought in mind, the ghosts bowed and entered Luo Mountain one by one to find a place to cultivate. Seeing the ghosts' performance, Feng Zichen nodded in satisfaction. Accept disciples? He did not know what the ghosts were like. How could he accept disciples so easily? At the very least, he had to observe for a period of time. His disciples had to inherit the destiny of the ghost Dao. It was related to the rise and fall of the ghost Dao. He could not be careless. These ghosts were not newborn living beings. They were as pure as a piece of white paper. They were all old demons who had been reborn and had a lot of thoughts. If he did not understand them and rashly accepted them as disciples, he might be cheated by them one day. Thus, accepting a disciple was a big deal and they had to be careful. Back then he had taken Feng Jie and the other two as his disciples because Feng Zichen knew their backgrounds very well. However, it was different from the current group of ghost cultivators. After a while, Feng Zichen seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly formed a seal with his hand and pointed at Luo Shan. Suddenly, the ghostly runes carved on the Luo mountain suddenly shone brightly and let out a rumbling sound that spread throughout the entire nether Blood Sea. The content of the Tao voice was none other than the introductory chapter of the Ghost Codex, the supreme scripture of the Ghost Tao, the method to condense the soul, as well as the method to cultivate the Yin spirit. The nether Blood Sea was boundless and there were countless innate true spirits. Feng Zichen had only preached for a few years, and the effect he could achieve was limited. How many people were able to activate their spiritual wisdom and step into the Ghost Tao? It was probably not even a billionth of the total. What about the remaining true spirits? Every day, new true spirit fragments would come from all over the wilderness. After all, countless living beings would die every day in the primordial world. These true spirits had never heard Feng Zichen talk about the Ghost Tao. What should they do? It was impossible for Feng Zichen to stay at Luo Shan and talk about the Ghost Tao to the ghosts of the Blood Sea all day. This was unrealistic and impossible. However, he could not ignore these true spirits. Therefore, Feng Zichen thought of a way to imprint the Ghost Codex on Luo Shan and spread it to the entire Blood Sea through Luo Shan, ensuring that every true spirit in the Blood Sea could hear it. The current Luo Shan was similar to a radio station in the future, constantly transmitting signals to the blood sea. And this signal could only be received by true spirits. It would not affect others. Of course, since it was a signal, there was naturally a difference in strength. The closer one was to Luo Shan, the better the signal, and the more complete the content one could hear. On the other hand, if one was far away, one could only hear some shallow content. It was not a problem to cultivate with this, but it was impossible to achieve anything great. Therefore, if one wanted to obtain the complete method of ghost cultivation, they could only get closer to Fengdu Luo Shan until they arrived in front of Feng Zichen. The easier it was to obtain, the less they would cherish it. If Feng Zichen directly spread the supreme scripture of the Ghost Tao, how would the world know the preciousness of the Ghost Codex? At that time, Feng Zichen's efforts would probably be belittled. Only when it was not easy to obtain would the world cherish it and know the greatness of Feng Zichen. Even if Tao ancestor Hongjun imparted the Tao, the innate life forms had to first pass the test of the chaos outside the heavens. All of a sudden, all the living beings below Daoyuo Jingxian were eliminated. Even Tao ancestor Hongjun was like this, let alone Feng Zichen. Seeking the Tao had always been difficult. Besides, if Feng Zichen directly imparted the Tao, the ghosts would cultivate outside and not come to Fengdu Luo Shan after obtaining the Tao. Then wouldn't he become a commander without an army? If the 10,000 ghosts were gone, how could he command them? Moreover, those ghost cultivators had only entered the Tao after obtaining his Tao. If any of them were to cause trouble outside, the karma involved would be recorded on his head. In this way, not only would he not get any benefits from preaching to the world, but he would also get into trouble. Then Feng Zichen would really be a fool. Therefore, he wanted to obtain the supreme inheritance of the Ghost Tao. Yes, he could come to Fengdu Luo Shan and be under Feng Zichen's control. Naturally, he could obtain the Ghost Codex. Otherwise, he could only rely on himself. Feng Zichen could not say anything about creating a cultivation method with his own ability. Not to mention Feng Zichen's reality, the atmosphere of the entire primordial world was like this. There were no good people in the primordial world. Those who were good people were all dead. The fate of ancestor Hong Yun was a living example. The rumbling of the Tao sound did not stop for 3 years. It was not until 3 years later that it gradually calmed down. Fengdu Luo Shan also needed energy to release the Tao sound. Moreover, it was the Tao sound that spread throughout the entire netherworld blood sea. The amount of energy required to do this was even greater. And this energy naturally could not be produced out of thin air. What it consumed was the Khanate Qi released by Luo Shan. However, Luo Shan still had to support the group of ghost cultivators on the mountain. It was impossible for him to use all his Khanate Qi on the Tao sound. Ghost cultivators also had to cultivate. They came to Luo Shan for Luo Shan's cultivation environment. If there was no Khanate Qi here, why would they stay here? Even with the supreme inheritance, without the Khanate Qi, Luo Shan could not keep the ghost cultivators. 3 years was already Luo Shan's limit. The next time would have to wait for 100 years. After all, Luo Shan's power was not endless. After formulating the rules for Luo Shan, Feng Zichen nodded in satisfaction and was about to turn around and walk towards Taoist Mingyi. Taoist Mingyi had contributed to the establishment of Luo Shan. Of course he had to thank him. Moreover, the netherworld blood sea was his territory. Feng Zichen had settled down here without his permission. He had to explain properly to avoid any misunderstandings. However, just as Feng Zichen was about to move, a sudden change occurred in the sky. Chapter 353. 2 pitch-black beams of light came from outer space. They crossed layers of void at an unimaginable speed and rushed towards the blood sea. In an instant, the 2 beams of black light approached from afar. They arrived at the blood sea from outer space and turned into 2 Khanate numinous treasures that floated in front of Feng Zichen. This is... Looking at the 2 Khanate numinous treasures, Feng Zichen was a little puzzled. However, suddenly, an idea flashed through his mind and he understood the origin of the 2 Khanate numinous treasures. They were Khanate numinous treasures bestowed to the Ghost Tao by the Heavenly Tao. When the Ghost Tao was first established, it did not have any treasures to suppress destiny or protect the Tao. Therefore, the Heavenly Tao specially bestowed 2 Khanate numinous treasures. One was to suppress the destiny of the Ghost Tao and the other was to protect the safety of the Ghost Tao. This was to protect the Ghost Tao and prevent it from dying halfway. If there was life, there would be death. The cycle of life and death was the truth of heaven and earth. It could be said that the appearance of the Ghost Tao made the primordial world more perfect. The Heavenly Tao had never been stingy with such a Tao that could perfect the primordial world. Could be said to be very generous. These two connate numinous treasures were definitely extraordinary. With that thought in mind, Feng Zichen reached out and grabbed the numinous treasure closest to him. When the numinous treasure entered his hand, there was a pop sound. The black light membrane that enveloped its body shattered, revealing the true appearance of the connate numinous treasure inside. It was a long black banner that was densely covered with runes. It emitted a strange light. It was incomparably dark and deep, as if it wanted to devour one's mind. Soul Summoning Banner. That was its name. It was a supreme-grade connate numinous treasure with 44 connate divine restrictions. It was only 2 connate divine restrictions away from being a connate cardinal treasure. As the name suggested, the Soul Summoning Banner could summon one's soul. It was a treasure that targeted the essence soul. With a shake of the Soul Summoning Banner, it could capture one's soul and essence soul. Anyone who touched it under Daluo Jingxian would die. Even if Daluo Jingxian was careless and was hit by the banner, his essence soul would tremble and he would be in a daze for a moment. If it was more serious, he might even be unconscious for a few days. The power of this treasure was obvious. It was the #1 killing treasure of the Ghost Dao. Of course, as a supreme-grade innate spiritual treasure, the power of the banner was not limited to this. It could also condense a shattered primordial spirit and restore it to its original state, thus achieving the effect of resurrection. The Soul Summoning Flag was a natural spirit treasure that was born from the Tao of life and death, and it possessed the ability to reverse life and death. Good treasure. Even though Feng Zichen had a lot of treasures, he couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised after knowing the function of the Soul Beckoning Banner. Bringing the dead back to life was no small matter. Reversing life and death was against the natural order of things. How could the Heavenly Tao allow it so easily? If he really did it, it would consume his providence. Moreover, the Soul Summoning Banner wanted to revive living beings with shattered primordial spirits. This was even more difficult. If one's primordial spirit was shattered, it was equivalent to having one's soul scattered. Only a golden immortal of the great all-embracing heaven would be able to recall the broken fragments of the primordial spirit from the boundless void and reassemble it to reappear in the world. However, this was a huge burden for Daluo Jingxian. How could it be easy to fight for one's life against the heavens? Logically speaking, Daluo Jingxian was omnipotent. It should be easy to condense a shattered primordial spirit. There was no need to go through so much trouble. Unfortunately, the primordial world had Mount Buzhou. It suppressed the river of spacetime and made it impossible for anyone to change the past or the future. It was even more impossible to reverse the cause and change everything. Because of Mount Buzhou, Daluo Jingxian's strongest method was crippled. He could not reverse the flow of time and change the past. Otherwise, with just a thought from a golden immortal, time would flow backward. No matter how thoroughly one died, he could revive them. Of course, people who had been forgotten by the entire history were exceptions. Daluo Jingxian did not have the ability to revive such a person. The Soul Summoning Flag could do something that even Daluo Jingxian could not do easily. Wasn't that the manifestation of its power? Furthermore, since the Soul Summoning Flag could target the essence soul, it could naturally target ghost cultivators. It could restrain all ghost cultivators and was the nemesis of the Ghost Dao. It had to be said that the Heavenly Tao had considered everything. With this treasure in hand, Feng Zichen's incarnation would be much more at ease in the future. The Ghost Dao not only had to respect him as its ancestor, but it also had to respect him. The Heavenly Tao is really generous. After putting away the flag, Feng Zichen was very happy. There were not many connate numinous treasures that were so close to connate cardinal treasures in the primordial world. Then, Feng Zichen looked at another connate numinous treasure. The flag had already brought him enough surprises. What kind of surprises would this connate numinous treasure bring him? It was really exciting. After crushing the light membrane, the connate numinous treasure inside revealed its true appearance. It was a large square seal. Simple. It was unusually simple. Apart from that word, Feng Zichen could not find any other adjectives to describe it. It was too ordinary and did not look gorgeous. It was square and did not have any embellishments around it. It was like a square stone. Only the ancient aura that had settled down after countless years and countless vicissitudes of life showed that it was not as ordinary as it looked on the surface. Ghost Emperor Seal. That was its name. It was ordinary, but it had a domineering name that did not match its appearance at all. Its aura was not as strong as the flag. In fact, it was far inferior. The Ghost Emperor Seal only had 9 connate divine restrictions and could barely be considered a low-grade connate numinous treasure. It was at the bottom of the connate numinous treasures and formed a sharp contrast with the Soul Summoning Flag. However, such an ordinary Ghost Emperor seal was more precious than the soul-summoning flag. That was because it was the treasure of destiny of the Ghost Tao. It was tightly connected to the destiny of the Ghost Tao. As the destiny of the Ghost Tao grew stronger, it would become stronger. Now the Ghost Tao had just been established. Other than Feng Zichen, there was not even a single cultivator in the heaven immortal realm. It could be said to be extremely miserable. How much destiny could such a ghost clan have? The reason why the Ghost Emperor seal could become a Khanate numinous treasure was because of Feng Zichen. If it was not for the fact that he had Daluo Jinshan's cultivation base and naturally had the destiny of the Tao, the Ghost Emperor seal would probably be a Khanate Dharma treasure when it was born. It was not even a Khanate numinous treasure. Ghost Emperor seal. What a good name. Only such a treasure is worthy of my identity. The Ghost Emperor seal, the seal of the Ghost Emperor, represented the supreme power of the Ghost Tao. It matched Feng Zichen's identity. Reaching out, Feng Zichen held the Ghost Emperor seal. Immediately, a burst of light flashed, and two large words appeared on the Ghost Emperor seal. They were written with Khanate Tao patterns. It was none other than Fengdu. As such, the Ghost Emperor seal was officially renamed Fengdu seal. This also meant that from now on, Fengdu was the Ghost Emperor, and the Ghost Emperor was Fengdu. When the world heard the name Fengdu, they knew that it was the Ghost Emperor. Fengdu had become synonymous with the Ghost Emperor. Luo Shan come. After sizing up the Fengdu seal for a moment, Feng Zichen suddenly formed a Dao seal and pointed at Luo Shan. He forcefully extracted a wisp of destiny from it and injected it into the Fengdu seal. Chapter 354. The blessed grotto heavens were created by heaven and earth. They were born with a wisp of heaven and earth's luck. Luo Shan was no exception. As the ancestral land of the Ghost Path and the holder of the supreme scripture of the Ghost Path, Luo Shan's luck and the Ghost Path's luck could be said to be tightly connected. Now that the Ghost Emperor seal had appeared, there was nothing wrong with Luo Shan, who was a part of the Ghost Path's luck, contributing a wisp of Khanate luck to increase its power. Buzz. After absorbing a wisp of Luo Shan's luck, the seal of Fengdu's aura suddenly soared by a large margin. It almost broke through the boundary of an inferior-grade Khanate numinous treasure and became a superior-grade Khanate numinous treasure. At the same time, Luo Shan's shadow slowly appeared on the seal of Fengdu's body, making it look a little different. Soon it won't be long before the seal of Fengdu becomes a superior-grade Khanate numinous treasure, or even a supreme-grade Khanate numinous treasure. Although Luo Shan's luck did not allow the seal of Fengdu to advance, Feng Zichen was not disappointed. Because he knew that when the Netherworld realm appeared, the Ghost Path's luck would soar, and the power of the seal of Fengdu would also increase greatly. When the Heaven realm appeared, the demon race's luck would soar, and they would have the capital to contend against the witch race. Then, the benefits that the Netherworld realm, which was not weaker than the Heaven realm, could bring to the Ghost Path could be deduced. Ghost was the name of the dead. In theory, it occupied half of the primordial world's forces and was the opposite of life. From this point of view, the future of the Ghost Path could be said to be limitless. There was a faint trend of it becoming the #1 force in the primordial world. However, if everything in this world could be carried out according to theory, there would not be so many disturbances. There was a difference between expectations and reality. If there was no reincarnation, the power of the Ghost Path might grow. However, after the appearance of reincarnation, the Ghost Path would completely lose its chance to prosper. If one could live, who would want to die? If one could be a human, who would want to be a ghost? If one could become an immortal, who would step into the Ghost Path? Now the Ghost Path was the only choice for the dead to start over again. However, after the appearance of reincarnation, there were more possibilities for the dead in the world. As for the Ghost Tao, it became a helpless choice. In the end, it was because the Ghost Path was not the righteous path. If the path of Ghost was like the great path of Xianmen, where several saints appeared one after another, the people of the world would definitely fight to learn it. Therefore, the theoretical power of the Ghost Tao depended on Feng Zichen's future achievements. If he used the Ghost Tao to achieve primordial chaos, it was hard for the Ghost Tao not to flourish. In the future, there were only 4 orthodoxies that flourished in the world and had an endless supply of incense: Xianmen, Diabolism, Taoism, and Buddhism. These 4 orthodoxies had one thing in common, that was, they all had saints behind them. This was to tell the world that only orthodoxies with saints could remain immortal in the world. After all, the primordial world was a place that emphasized strength. In this place, strength determined everything. As long as the Emperor of Fengdu was strong enough, there was no need for him to do anything. the path of ghost would naturally prosper. The world's yearning for power was unstoppable. After seeing the highest achievement of the ghost Tao, they would rush forward one after another. After Tao ancestor Hong Jun became a saint, the great Tao of the celestial sect of wonders became the mainstream of the primordial world. Everyone was proud of being the successor of the celestial sect of wonders. This was because they saw an incomparably vast future from the great Tao of the celestial sect. Becoming a saint. Indestructible. If the path of ghost was like this, it was inevitable that it would prosper. After putting away the seal of Fengdu, Feng Zichen first calmed himself down from thinking about the future and became extremely excited. Only then did he walk slowly towards Taoist Mingi. Poor way of Fengdu greets fellow Taoist Mingi. Feng Zichen bowed and greeted him. So it's fellow Taoist Fengdu. May I know which immortal mountain you cultivated in previously and why you came to the Blood Sea? Taoist Mingi asked after returning the greeting. Although he welcomed other great mediums to stay in the Blood Sea, he couldn't make it too obvious. Otherwise it would seem that he was begging others. This wasn't good. If word got out, would he still want his face? Therefore he still had to have the right attitude. Moreover, Taoist Mingi was also quite curious about Feng Zichen's background. It would be best if he could ask about it. In Taoist Mingi's heart, he had already confirmed that Feng Zichen was the incarnation of a great mediums. What he needed to do now was to confirm the identity of this great mediums and see who he was. It was good that he had an idea in his heart and knew which fellow Taoist was on his side. Fengdu is just a primitive wanderer. He roams everywhere and has no fixed residence. In the past, let's not talk about it. Waving his hand, Feng Zichen put on a look as if he couldn't bear to look back on the past and said, "Fellow Taoist, you must be joking." Taoist Mingi's face twitched. He resisted the urge to scold him and forced a smile. This person's ability to lie really came out of his mouth. Ghosts wandered everywhere. With your cultivation when you first came to the Blood Sea, you were only in the innate realm. Not to mention wandering, I'm afraid that you would be accidentally trampled to death by ferocious beasts as soon as you stepped out. If this incarnation had not been condensed in the Blood Sea, Taoist Mingi would have read his name backwards. When Feng Zichen condensed his soul, his cultivation was only in the innate realm. Taoist Mingi was not a fool. How could he not see that this was an incarnation condensed by a great mediums? The Blood Sea was a dangerous place. Even Tai Jingxian had to be careful when they came. You were just a small innate realm cultivator. If you swaggered through the Blood Sea, wouldn't you be telling others that there was something wrong with you? However, Taoist Mingi only thought these words in his heart and did not say them out loud. Feng Zichen's attitude had already made it clear that he would not reveal his true identity. If these words were to be said, other than making the two of them fall out directly, it would be useless. Of course, Taoist Mingi also knew in his heart that if it was so easy to find out the other party's true origin, the other party would not have hidden so much previously. But in the end he still had to give it a try. If he succeeded, his goal would be achieved. That would be a profit. If he failed, it did not matter. The other party was in the Blood Sea. There would be a day when he would give himself away. Taoist Mingi did not believe that the other party's identity could be hidden forever, right? If it really could not be done, there were only so many great mediums in the primordial world. If he compared them one by one, he would eventually be able to find out. Here, Poor Wei has to apologize to you first. Without your permission, Fengdu settled down in the Blood Sea without your permission. I hope you can forgive me. After a while, Feng Zichen suddenly apologized to Taoist Mingi. As everyone knew, the Netherworld Blood Sea was Taoist Mingi's territory. He had settled down here without giving any notice. Even if he was chased out by Taoist Mingi, he deserved it. No matter how he talked about it in the primordial world, he would not be able to make any sense. No one would stand on his side. Feng Zichen's actions were like secretly running to someone else's land, thinking that it was not bad, and directly building a house there. Chapter 355. If this happened to anyone, they would not be able to tolerate it. Feng Zichen thought for a while. If this had happened to him, he would have been the one to blame. TSK. If someone settled down on Ziwei planet, not to mention a home, he would tear that person down. If he was already like this, what about others? Although he did not know why Taoist Mingi did not care much about this matter and even took the initiative to help him build Luoshan Blessed Land. But he still had to apologize. After all, no matter what, he was in the wrong in this matter. Haha. Fellow Taoist, you don't have to do this. This sea of blood is lonely and filthy. If there are outsiders willing to live in it and add some life to the sea of blood, the poor Wei would be happy. Why are you angry? Taoist Mingi replied with a loud laugh. Feng Zichen's attitude made him very satisfied. Therefore when he spoke he could not help but have some feelings. The sincerity in his tone was touching. Unfortunately, Feng Zichen did not appreciate it at all. Instead, he felt that he had become stupid from practicing martial arts. It was fine if he was not angry about this kind of thing, but he even looked happy. It was really strange. Originally, Feng Zichen had planned to spend a lot of money to dispel Taoist Mingi's anger. However, his attitude at this time was something that Feng Zichen did not expect at all. He could not help but be a little stunned. Thank you, fellow Taoist. Please take care of me in the future, fellow Taoist. However, soon Feng Zichen reacted and hurriedly said, no matter what Taoist Mingi's purpose was, since he had already expressed his attitude, he would just follow along. It was good to save a sum of money. Therefore, not only did Feng Zichen say it, but he also changed his words and called Taoist Mingi as fellow Taoist to improve the relationship between the two of them. Fellow Taoist, you are really broad-minded. You are far from comparable to Fengdu. In the end, Feng Zichen added a sentence. It could be considered as him saying it from the bottom of his heart. This sentence was true. Taoist Mingi could not even care about this kind of thing. His breadth of mind was indeed far from what Feng Zichen could compare to. Looks like rumors can't be trusted so easily. Seeing how happy Mingi Taoist was, Feng Zichen praised him again. After all, she owed him a favor. Even if he praised her a few more times, she would not lose a piece of flesh. You're exaggerating, fellow Taoist. You and I are neighbors, so we should help each other. There's no need to be so polite. After being praised by Feng Zichen, Mingi Taoist not only felt complacent, but also blushed as he spoke. To prehistorical powerful beings, as long as it didn't involve the fundamental competition of the great Tao, they still cared about their reputation. Even the saints were no exception to this. Just like that, the two of them started chatting and exchanging some cultivation experiences. Although it was said to be an exchange of cultivation experiences, in reality, it was Taoist Mingi who was speaking and Feng Zichen who was listening. The gap between them was too great. Taoist Mingi was one of the top 10 great mystical abilities in the primordial world. He had once heard of the Tao in the Purple Cloud Palace and was friends with the saint. He was an old monster who had lived for countless years. His experience, his accumulation, his comprehension of the great Tao, and his understanding of heaven and earth. Even 10 Feng Zichen added together could not compare to him. Fortunately, Feng Zichen had the inheritance of Pangu and the inheritance of the 3,000 Chaos Fiend gods. His understanding of the great Tao was more advanced. When Taoist Mingi was talking, he could interject from time to time and share his own opinions so that the scene would not be too awkward and turn into a one-man show for Taoist Mingi. Feng Zichen's goal was to ease his embarrassment. Little did he know that his actions made Taoist Mingi more and more certain that he was the incarnation of a great mystical ability. No, it was not as simple as a great mystical ability. Perhaps it was a supreme expert left behind from the ancient times, a big shot of the same generation as the Tao ancestor. At Taoist Mingi's level of cultivation, it was extremely difficult for him to improve. However, every time he thought about Feng Zichen's opinions, he would gain something and his cultivation would improve a little. Although it was only a tiny bit, he was indeed making progress. How incredible was this? Just one sentence could make him gain something. The great mystical ability of the same generation as him would never be able to do that. They had known each other for hundreds of millions of years. Although they did not completely understand each other's background, it was not a problem to understand each other's methods. They were all old demons who had lived for many years, who did not know each other. If they really had this ability, their cultivation would have surpassed others and reached the Tao realm. They would not be like him, struggling in the sage-to-be realm. Therefore, Feng Zichen's original body was definitely not a great mystical ability of the same generation as him. Among the great mystical ability of the untainted land, other than those of the same generation as him, there were only the overlords of the ancient times and the supreme experts of the ancient times. After him, no great mystical ability was born. Among the innate gods and demons who were born in the current era, there were not many who were in the sage-to-be realm, let alone great mystical ability. It could even be said that there was not a single one. That was because the time they had cultivated was too short. If they wanted to cultivate to the sage-to-be realm, how could it be possible without the accumulation of an eon? This seemed to be a curse. Since the emergence of the sage-to-be realm, no one had been able to cultivate to the sage-to-be realm within an eon. If it was not a junior, it could only be a senior. Moreover, Feng Zichen's understanding was full of the charm of chaos. That was the unique aura of the ancient times, when heaven and earth had not fully evolved. In this way, Feng Zichen's identity was about to be revealed. The supreme expert left behind from the ancient times, the overlord of the ancient times. Only such a person could come into contact with the great Tao that was far beyond the heavenly Tao. The ancient times were an era that people yearned for. There were opportunities that later generations did not have, opportunities that belonged to the great Tao. As for Feng Zichen's expression of sudden realization, thoughtfulness, or confusion when he listened to his preaching, he automatically imagined that it was a disguise in order to hide his identity. The supreme expert of the ancient times bathed in the glory of the great Tao. He was definitely experienced and knowledgeable. How could he be shocked by his Tao? It must be a disguise. At this moment, Taoist Mingi seemed to have fallen into a misunderstanding. In order to confirm his guess, he forcibly imagined all kinds of reasonable reasons. The more he thought about it, the more reasonable he felt, and he firmly believed it. At this time, even if Feng Zichen told him the truth, he would not believe it. That was why it was said that one's imagination was the most fatal. It was not entirely Taoist Mingi's fault. After all, what Feng Zichen said was the truth of the demon god of chaos, which contained the mystery of the great Tao. It was really too frightening. Of course, with Taoist Mingi's wisdom and realm, no matter how frightening Feng Zichen's words were, he might not be able to tell at first. But as the topic went deeper, it was impossible for him not to see the problem. However, Feng Zichen had the merit of splitting open the sky. It seemed that he had a premonition that he was about to leave. From the beginning, the merit of splitting open the sky was fully exerted. He intended to do his best to help Feng Zichen at this last moment. Chapter 356. Under the influence of the merit of creation, Taoist Mingi's spiritual sense was infinitely weakened, so much so that some subtle flaws were ignored by him. And those obvious flaws were forcibly filled in by him with various reasons and reasonable explanations. It was a pity that Taoist Mingi, a legend of a generation, had suffered a big setback today. His wisdom of the past was completely gone, and his thoughts were gradually corrupted, and became more and more deviant. Affected by this, Taoist Mingi became more and more polite. Feng Zichen was a little confused. Facing Taoist Mingi's sudden enthusiasm, he could only smile in response to him, lest he be too embarrassed. If Feng Zichen knew what Taoist Mingi was thinking, he would not know whether to cry or laugh. His body was indeed an incarnation, but his realm was only that of Daluo Jingxian. He was still thousands of miles away from being a great magician. As for being a supreme master from the Archean era, that was even more impossible. It had been less than 1,000,000 years since he was born. He had not even touched the edge of the Archean era, let alone the Archean era. It was just that Feng Zichen had no idea what Taoist Mingi was thinking. He could only continue to chat with him, extremely puzzled. What's going on with Taoist Mingi? Why is he becoming more and more enthusiastic? Strange, really strange. He seems to have misunderstood something? Gradually, Feng Zichen tasted a hint of meaning from Taoist Mingi's words. He seemed to have a great misunderstanding and regarded himself as a peerless master. At this moment, Feng Zichen was speechless. He was not a fool. On the contrary, he was very smart. Especially now, with the blessing of the merit of creation, his wisdom had reached an unimaginable level. Taoist Mingi's abnormality, of course, could not be hidden from him. Along with Taoist Mingi's words, Feng Zichen understood the cause and effect. But he did not explain anything. Taoist Mingi's misunderstanding was only good for him, and there was no harm. Since he had misunderstood, he would let him continue to misunderstand. The most important thing now was to find a way to leave so that he would not be exposed. Things like realms could be concealed for a while but not forever. The gap between Daluo Jingxian and the sage-to-be was obvious. Daluo Jingxian saw a completely different world and had a completely different understanding of the heavenly Tao. If they continued to talk, Feng Zichen's brain would run out of ideas, and he would be exposed. Therefore he had to leave. He had to leave quickly. Before he was exposed and Taoist Mingi was fully convinced, he had to leave quickly. It was hard to imagine what kind of unwise thing Taoist Mingi would do when he realized the truth and flew into a rage out of humiliation. Come to think of it, it would definitely be very terrifying. At the very least, it would not be something that a Daluo Jingxian level incarnation like him could bear. With this thought in mind, Feng Zichen hurriedly searched for one or two plausible primordial chaos theories from Panga's inheritance. Following Mingi Taoist's words, he suddenly spoke. Then, when Mingi Taoist was about to comprehend something, Feng Zichen said directly, Brother, poor Wei has just come to the Blood Sea and is not familiar with this place. Therefore, I plan to take advantage of my free time to travel around the Blood Sea and familiarize myself with the situation here. Therefore, if you have nothing important to do, poor Wei will leave first. When everything is settled, I will come and discuss with you. After all, they were going to settle down in the Blood Sea. It was reasonable to familiarize themselves with the situation. There was nothing wrong with Feng Zichen's excuse. Help yourself, brother. Poor Wei still has something important to do, so I won't see you off. I hope you won't blame me. Now, Taoist Mingyi's mind was completely attracted by the primordial chaos theory that Feng Zichen threw out. He only wanted to comprehend it as soon as possible. How could he tolerate anything else? Therefore, in the face of Feng Zichen's request to leave, he did not even think about it and directly agreed. Stepping into the primordial chaos Tao realm had become Taoist Mingyi's obsession. Anything related to it could firmly attract his mind. Moreover, it was the primordial chaos theory that Pangu had passed down. If not, even if Taoist Mingyi did not accompany Feng Zichen to travel the Blood Sea, he would have personally sent him out. How could he be like now? His tone was full of impatience, and there was a hint of wanting to drive him away. It had to be said that Feng Zichen was really crafty. He had completely figured out Taoist Mingyi's thoughts. On the one hand, he had completely attracted Taoist Mingyi's mind by throwing out the primordial chaos theory, so that he would not have the time to care about his departure. On the other hand, with the primordial chaos theory, Taoist Mingyi's understanding of him as an ancient supreme expert would undoubtedly be deeper and more convinced. Brother, poor Wei will leave first. After bowing to Taoist Mingyi, Feng Zichen turned and walked out. After this, his treatment in the Nether Blood Sea would undoubtedly be much better. It would also be more convenient for him to do things in the future. That was, before he became a great divine power, it was better for him to not meet Taoist Mingyi so as not to expose his background and cause big trouble. After leaving Taoist Mingyi's place, Feng Zichen did not return to Luoshan. Instead, he quickly rushed towards the depths of the Blood Sea. At the same time, his divine consciousness was also crazily gushing out, covering every place he passed. He seemed to be looking for something and also seemed to be sensing something. That's right, Feng Zichen was looking for something. He was looking for the Nether Realm. In the past, Pangu opened the sky, the chaos shattered, and the innate clear and turbid chi were born. The innate clear chi was light and agile. It floated up, forming the sky and giving birth to the heaven realm. The innate turbid chi was thick and heavy. It sank down, turning into the earth and giving birth to the Nether Realm. The heaven realm was in the sky. The Nether Realm was naturally on the ground. And the deepest part of the earth was the deepest part of the Nether Blood Sea. The Nether Realm was in the Blood Sea. Otherwise, why would the Blood Sea be called the Nether Blood Sea? The Nether Realm had long existed. It was just that the opportunity had not arrived and had not appeared. Just like how the demons wanted to establish the heavenly court, the heaven realm was born. The Nether Realm would only appear when Hutu transformed into reincarnation. Now, Hutu had yet to transform into reincarnation, and the Nether Realm had yet to appear. It was probably impossible to find it from the depths of the earth. The heaven realm was above Mount Buzhou. But before it appeared, who could find it? One had to know that back then, when the great masters went to the Purple Cloud Palace to listen to the Tao, they had entered the chaos beyond Mount Buzhou. 3,000 great masters had passed by this place several times, but they had never found the shadow of the heaven realm. Could be seen how hidden it was. If the heaven realm was like this, the Nether Realm, which was of the same level as it, might not be that bad. The Taoist Mingyi was the master of the Blood Sea. For countless years, he had never discovered the existence of the Nether Realm. However, just because others could not find it did not mean that Feng Zichen could not find it. He was fated to be in the Nether Realm. The Nether Realm, also known as the Netherworld, was a world that belonged to the dead. It was a world that belonged to ghosts. Chapter 357. Feng Zichen established the ghost path and passed down the ghost cultivation method. He was the master of the ghost path, the emperor of all ghosts. With such an identity, he was the supreme god of the Netherworld, the ruler of the Netherworld, and the destined master of the Netherworld. This was his fate with the Netherworld. As the future master of the Netherworld, it should not be too difficult for Feng Zichen to find the Netherworld if he wanted to. Swoosh, swoosh. Feng Zichen rushed towards the depths of the Blood Sea at the fastest speed. In the blink of an eye, several years had passed. On this day, Feng Zichen, who was rushing, suddenly felt a different aura. His heart trembled and he stopped abruptly. It's here. That aura was extremely cold, as if it came from the Netherworld. The coldness it emitted was enough to freeze one's primordial spirit. Without a doubt, only the netherworld could emit such a cold aura. Even if it was not, it had a lot to do with it. Boom. A majestic ghost aura erupted from Feng Zichen's body. It was so powerful that it made the void tremble. As the void trembled, the ghost aura kept pouring in and spreading into the depths of the void, as if it was looking for something. It wanted to find traces of the netherworld. However, the netherworld was hidden too deeply. The ghost aura searched almost all the void, but it could not find any trace of it. Moreover, the aura that it had sensed earlier seemed to have disappeared and could not be found anymore. Suddenly, Feng Zichen sat down cross-legged and chanted the Tao scripture. For a moment, the sound of Tao resounded through the void. Countless runes bloomed. They were vast and unfathomable. Billions of them were endless. The runes were not blazing, nor were they dazzling. On the contrary, they were pitch black and emitted a strange light. They were incomparably deep, like a black hole that wanted to devour one's soul. Those were the ghost path runes which were used by the dead. They were formed by the extremely cold aura. Swoosh. As soon as the ghost path runes appeared, they spread out and covered the entire void. Strands of black chi appeared, emitting a shocking chill. Just a glance was enough to make people feel a chill from the depths of their souls. The energy of the ninth hell was pure yin energy without any yang energy. It was a specialty of the netherworld, and it was of extreme yin and extreme coldness. It was specially targeted at the soul core. Buzz buzz, the void trembled again. The appearance of the 9 underworlds chi triggered an inexplicable change. At the same time, the runes of the ghost path also moved. A strange power spread out and resonated with the path of death, attracting its power. In the next moment, the world changed. All signs of life disappeared in an instant, replaced by a dense aura of death. The law of life was also disappearing, replaced by another law filled with the aura of death. Everything was turning around. The reversal of life and death. In the blink of an eye, the world underwent a huge change, completing the transformation from a world of life to a world of death. The netherworld had appeared. Feng Zichen used the ghost Tao to forcefully shake the great Tao of death in the unseen world. Borrowing its great power, he suppressed the depths of the blood sea and forced the nether realm to appear. Phew, comfortable. This is the world that I should be in. Taking a deep breath, Feng Zichen inhaled the aura of death floating in the void into his abdomen. Not only did he not feel uncomfortable, but he also felt unusually comfortable. His incarnation was a ghost after all. It was obvious that he was more used to the aura of death than the aura of life. Coming to this world filled with the aura of death was like returning home. Naturally, he felt incomparably comfortable. Rumble. In front of Feng Zichen, the ghost chi suddenly surged, slowly forming the shadow of a world. That was the netherworld. Because, from that blurry image, Feng Zichen vaguely saw a huge gate. The gate of hell, the supreme treasure of the netherworld, the legendary gate to the netherworld. It was the gate to the netherworld. As time passed, the shadow of the netherworld became more and more real, and the true appearance of the gate was gradually revealed. It was a huge pitch-black gate, and its entire body was enveloped by a dense aura of death. It was incomparably eerie. Because of its special identity, it was connected to the netherworld. Therefore, its height and size were unknown. Looking up, one could see that there was a big board hanging on the gate. On it were the 3 big golden words, Gate of Hell, written with innate Tao patterns. Behind the Gate of Hell was a yellow dirt road. It was very long and led to the depths of the netherworld. That was the Yellow Springs Road, the last part of the road that the dead had to walk. Later generations said that on both sides of the Yellow Springs Road, there were fiery red spider lilies. They were as red as blood. From afar it looked like a carpet paved with blood. Because it was as red as fire, it was known as the road illuminated by fire. This was also the only scenery and color on the long Yellow Springs Road. People would step on the spider lilies to lead them to the netherworld prison. However, in today's world, the netherworld had yet to appear. Even the netherworld had yet to be born, let alone the spider lilies that appeared later. As a result, the Yellow Springs Road now looked completely barren with nothing at all. If it was not in the netherworld, it would be no different from an ordinary yellow dirt road. A purple brilliance appeared and dyed Feng Zichen's eyes purple. This was the Tao Eye. In order to see the scene behind the Yellow Springs Road, Feng Zichen used the Tao Eye. In an instant his vision changed. It was as if he had merged with heaven and earth and obtained an infinite expansion. All the fog was disappearing. His gaze passed through the layers of void and saw the scene in the depths of the netherworld. At the end of the Yellow Springs Road, a green stone appeared. On its body, there was the power of time that could not be dissipated. There was also a trace of fate. The Three-Life Stone. This should be one of the legendary treasures of the Netherworld, the Three-Life Stone. From the aura that it exuded, it was not difficult to tell that it was a supreme-grade innate spirit treasure. Moreover, it was a time-attribute innate spirit treasure. Moreover, it seemed to have been favored by fate. There were traces of fate on its body. The Three-Life Stone was about 30 feet in size. The front was as smooth as a mirror. There were words on the back that were as red as blood, introducing its functions. At the top, the words "Reach the other shore early" were engraved. They were as red as blood. It recorded everyone's previous life, current life and future life. The cause of the previous life, the effect of the current life, the cycle of fate, the rise and fall of fate were all heavily engraved on the Three-Life Stone. It witnessed the bitterness and joy, sorrow and joy, laughter and tears of all living beings. The debts that should be paid and the feelings that should be repaid were written off in front of the Three-Life Stone. It was born from time and formed from fate. It reflected the past, future, and present. It had all kinds of karma and had endless magical uses. It was truly a first-class treasure. Unfortunately, such a treasure could not be moved. Otherwise, it would be another earth-shattering treasure in the primordial world. Heaven-defying items naturally had restrictions. The ability of the Three-Life Stone was so powerful. If it was used carelessly, wouldn't it cause trouble? Would the order of the world still be needed? If there were no restrictions, such a treasure would not be a supreme-grade connate spirit treasure, but a connate cardinal treasure. Without restrictions, it was the privilege of a connate cardinal treasure to unleash its power without any scruples. It was also because of this that connate cardinal treasures truly had the power to destroy the world. That was why there were so few connate cardinal treasures in the primordial world. The heavenly Tao could still see more than 10 connate cardinal treasures and observe carefully. There would not be any major trouble. If there were 100 connate cardinal treasures, hiss. Just thinking about it made one's teeth ache. That was not a connate cardinal treasure, but a bomb that could blow up the entire world. If there were 100 connate cardinal treasures, the heavenly Tao would not need to operate the world. It would be enough to focus on the owners of these connate cardinal treasures. With 100 time bombs at home, no one would sleep well. If they suddenly exploded, the consequences would be too serious. There would be a problem if the heavenly Tao did not keep an eye on them. Sigh. What a pity for a good treasure. Shaking his head and sighing, Feng Zichen continued to look back. If he could not leave the netherworld, half of the Three-Life Stone would be wasted. Furthermore, Feng Zichen felt that even in the netherworld, the Three-Life Stone could not be used casually. Otherwise, the Three-Life Stone would not have become a public item of the netherworld in the future. Obviously, one had to pay a certain price to use it. And this price was very, very big, so big that no one dared to become its owner. A treasure related to fate, its price was naturally related to fate. Just this point alone was enough to make people shrink back. Fate could not be explained or seen through. It was better not to provoke it. Behind the Three-Life Stone was a high platform made of yellow soil. That was the home viewing platform. Here, one could climb the platform and look at the situation of the Yang family. Thus, this place became a window for ghosts to look at the world of the living. It was also a holy land for the living and the dead to communicate. When they arrived at the home viewing platform, they finally looked at their hometown and cried loudly. Only then did they wholeheartedly head to the next stop, the netherworld, to receive their trial. It was the ghost on the home viewing platform panicked, looking with 2 lines of tears. Wife, children, old and young, huddled by the coffin, relatives and friends gathered in the morning hall. Behind the home viewing platform was a majestic palace. It was the palace of the Lord of the Netherworld, and also where the Netherworld was located in the future. This palace was the same as the immortal palace of the heavenly court. It was created by heaven and earth. It was overflowing with light and vibrant colors. It was surrounded by Taoist rhymes and was extremely majestic. However, reincarnation had yet to appear, and the Netherworld had yet to appear. The entire Netherworld was empty, and not a single ghost could be seen. After glancing at these great halls, Feng Zichen did not find the legendary 10 halls of Yama, nor did he find the shadow of the 18 levels of hell. That's right, the 10 halls of Yama and the 18 levels of hell were all created by Buddhism. In the beginning, the Netherworld did not have these things. The first master of the Netherworld was the Bain Fengdu Emperor. He was the ruler of the Netherworld, the ruler of the Netherworld, and the ruler of the Netherworld. The Emperor of Fengdu was the ruler of hell. He held the highest position in the Netherworld and was in charge of the Netherworld. He was the master of all ghosts in the world. All living creatures would enter hell after death. Their souls were all under the jurisdiction of the Emperor of Fengdu. He would kill ghosts and punish them based on the sins they had committed when they were alive. There were 75 divisions under him. Each division was in charge of capturing ghosts and notifying them of their entry and exit. If there were relatives of the Yangtze who expiated the ghosts of the netherworld, the Emperor of Fengdu would also decide to pardon them and send their ghosts to be refined into the heavens. Under his name, there were the ghost emperors of the 5 directions and the ghost gods of the 6 heavens of Rahu heaven to help him manage the netherworld. The Emperor of Fengdu was the ruler of the netherworld. His position was second only to the master of Samsara, Hutu, and he had boundless power. Even the Lord of Mount Tai of the celestial sect of wonders, the great sacred emperor equaling heaven of the eastern peak, entered the netherworld and ruled the netherworld. He was called the Een Son of Heaven and still had to be respected. As for the 10 halls of Yama, they were the Een Son of Heaven's subordinates. Even the Een Son of Heaven had to listen to the Emperor of Fengdu, let alone them. In order to plan the netherworld, Buddhism first sent out the 10 halls of Yama and then established the 18 levels of hell. They worked hard and finally perfected the rules of the netherworld. The 10 halls of Yama divided power and greatly increased the speed of the netherworld's operation. The netherworld was indeed better than the previous model. The appearance of the 18 levels of hell was even more significant. It divided sins into 18 levels, causing people to enter according to their sins. It showed the fairness of the heavenly Tao. The original Fengdu hell was not as perfect as the 18 levels of hell. The heinous and evil people as well as ghosts and demons were all imprisoned in the Fengdu hell, never to be reincarnated. The Fengdu hell was more terrifying and sinister than the 18 levels of hell in the Buddhist world. However, it was not as fair as the 18 levels of hell. Buddhism had contributed greatly to the development of the netherworld. However, before Buddhism could receive the fruits of victory, the celestial sect interfered. Not only did they incorporate the 10 halls of Yama, but they also took over the 18 levels of hell. If not for Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's help in stabilizing the netherworld, Buddhism would have suffered a double loss this time. There's always a higher mountain. Thinking of the legends of the future, Feng Zichen sighed. Buddhism's plan could be said to be perfect. They almost took control of the netherworld. But unfortunately, the celestial sect's skills were better. They directly took away their results, making Buddhism's efforts go to waste. However, these were not important. Now these results were all his. After he entered the netherworld, the 10 halls of Yama and the 18 levels of hell would be opened by him. The pagoda had been in his hands for so many years. It was time to put it to use. He believed that the 18 levels of hell formed by the pagoda would definitely be more perfect than the ones opened by Buddhism. With this thought in mind, Feng Zichen looked towards the center of the netherworld. That was the Ghost Emperor's bedroom, which was also his future residence. Suddenly, from the corner of his eye, Feng Zichen saw a mirror. With just a glance he almost fell into it. Under the reflection of the mirror, all his sins from birth until now were reflected. One by one they appeared in his heart and questioned him. Even merit could not stop it. This tribulation was born from the heart. External forces were useless. Fortunately, Feng Zichen had always done things with a clear conscience. A mere heart-examining tribulation was not a problem for him. In just a few days he regained his clarity and broke through the tribulation. At this moment, when he looked at the mirror again, he was completely unaffected. So it's the mirror of karma. No wonder it's so capable. In front of him there was a high platform with a mirror on it. The platform was 10 feet tall and the mirror was big. It hung to the east and 7 words were written on it. There are no good people in front of the mirror of karma. It was the treasure of the netherworld, the mirror of karma. All karma had retribution. This was what the mirror of karma could do. Good souls did not have to come to the mirror of karma. Because there were words on the platform, there were no good people in front of the mirror of karma. If a good person died, his spirituality would be bright. In front of the mirror of karma, there was only emptiness. It was only because there was no shadow in his heart that he could not see his true form clearly. Chapter 358. The light of the good soul became brighter and brighter. The greater the virtue, the closer it was to the heavenly court. There was no need for them to come here if they wanted to investigate the merits and demerits of the various palaces. Hence, the retribution mirror was also known as the retribution mirror. The retribution mirror was formed by the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. When a mortal soul came here, it could illuminate their appearance and not hide at all. However, this was not the retribution mirror's power. People lived from young to old and had many sins in their lives. However, people were also spiritual beings. They understood what they did. As the saying went, they knew it in their hearts. They remembered all the sins of their lives in their hearts. They knew what they were doing. Their actions were not ordered by their hearts. The most evil in their lives came from their hearts. In front of the retribution mirror, all kinds of sins appeared. Even if one was protected by virtue and was not tainted by negative karma, one still could not escape the retribution mirror. The retribution mirror targeted the sins in one's heart. This matter had nothing to do with virtue or cultivation. It came from the heart. It was a tribulation of the heart. Only with a clear conscience could one break through it. No matter how powerful one's magic power was or how much virtue one had, as long as one felt guilty, one would have nowhere to hide under the retribution mirror. The retribution mirror revealed its true form and secretly supplemented the scriptures. Yin laws were selfless and young people were punished for their evil deeds. What a heaven-defying treasure. Even Daluo Jingxian would lose his soul for a moment if the retribution mirror accidentally shone on him. After witnessing the might of the retribution mirror, Feng Zichen could not help but sigh. When experts fought, a moment of absent-mindedness could decide everything, not to mention a moment of absent-mindedness. The outcome could be reversed in an instant. The might of the retribution mirror could be seen from this. However, like the three-live stone, the retribution mirror could not leave the underworld. Otherwise, it would be another earth-shattering treasure. Feng Zichen withdrew his gaze from the retribution mirror and continued to look ahead. Just then, a fork in the road appeared at the back of the underworld. Feeling curious, Feng Zichen followed his senses and looked at one of the paths. That is, hellfire. At the end of the path, Feng Zichen saw a fiery domain. It was huge, even bigger than the great wide world. It was filled with black flames, burning fiercely, but it wasn't hot. Instead, it emitted a chill that penetrated one's soul. That was hellfire, a supreme true flame born from the quintessence of the netherworld. It possessed boundless might, extreme yin and extreme coldness, and it was one of the 10 great true flames of the primeval era. The fire domain was boundless, as if it was connected to the 9 underworlds. There was no end in sight, and the closer one got to the core of the fire domain, the stronger the hellfire became. Before he even got close to the core of the fire domain, Feng Zichen felt a bone-piercing chill. It followed his gaze and burned toward him. He was forced to withdraw his gaze in advance. So strong. The power of this fiery domain is so strong. Even if Daluo Jingxian came, he wouldn't be able to last long in the core of the fire domain. At most, he would be burned to ashes in 100 years. Feng Zichen said with lingering fear as he mobilized his dermic powers to extinguish the hellfire that was burning towards him. Without a doubt, in the netherworld, the only place that could have such a terrifying scene was hell. This fire domain was the legendary hell. It was the original hell, the hell that was born spontaneously from the quintessence of the netherworld. Before the netherworld was in charge of hell. The Buddhists used it as the foundation to create the 18 levels of hell. Anyone who bore karma would be sent to hell after death and suffer the pain of the hellfire burning their souls. The heavier the karma, the closer one was to the core of hell, the heavier the pain. Daluo Jingxian couldn't escape either. It was created by heaven and earth. It's really dangerous. Just the contact made Feng Zichen understand that if he didn't have a supreme treasure to protect himself, even he couldn't break into this hell. If he wasn't careful, he might fall into it and be in danger of dying. Hell was the prison of the netherworld. It was a place to imprison and punish the souls of the dead who had sinned deeply in their lives. It was an important part of the operation of heaven and earth. It showed that good and evil would be repaid. It was the embodiment of the justice of the heavenly Tao. This was an important place in the primordial world. No matter how dangerous or terrifying it was not an exaggeration. If it wasn't strong, how could it show the greatness of the heavenly Tao? Feng Zichen looked at hell with slight fear and retracted his gaze. No matter how strong hell was, so what? In the end, it was still his. At the end of the other road, as Feng Zichen expected, was the bridge of helplessness. After drinking Meng Po's soup and crossing this bridge, one could be reincarnated. There were 3 bridges, all paved with blue stone. The bridge in the middle was the most gorgeous. This was the bridge prepared for the ghosts of good people. Those who could cross this bridge all had merit on them. They walked the highest level of reincarnation. In their next life they would either be rich and noble or become immortals and achieve the Tao. They were born extraordinary. This was a noble bridge. Those who could cross this bridge would definitely be nobles in their next life, no matter what happened in this life. The bridge on the left was ordinary and did not look outstanding. This was a bridge prepared for ordinary people. These people did not make any great contributions in their lives, nor did they make any great mistakes. After crossing this bridge, there would be no preferential treatment, nor would there be any harsh treatment. They would walk the ordinary cycle of reincarnation. In their next life, they would continue to join an ordinary family and repeat the life of their previous life. Only when they had a shocking encounter would their fate change. They could either do good and accumulate merit, do evil, or meet a noble person. All of these could change their fate. The bridge on the far right was a little simple. The huge blue stone was full of mottled traces. It was very desolate. This was a bridge prepared for evil people. Those ghosts who were entangled in negative karma would pass through this bridge after returning from the punishment of hell and enter the worst reincarnation. In their next life they would be animals like cows, horses, pigs and sheep, or plants like flowers and trees. In short, they would no longer be humans. The bridge of helplessness, the bridge of helplessness. In the future, the bridge of helplessness's reputation could be said to be the greatest among the treasures of the netherworld, second only to the 6 paths of reincarnation. This was not because its power was stronger than other treasures. Instead, it was because there were too many sad and beautiful love stories about it. The bridge of helplessness, the parting of the previous life, the meeting of this life, and the reunion of the next life. Thinking of the legends of the future, even Feng Zichen could not help but look at the bridge of helplessness a few more times. Unfortunately, in front of the bridge of helplessness, it was empty. Not to mention infatuated men and resentful women, even Mengpa could not be seen. Even goddess Pingxin had not been born, let alone Mengpa. The entire nether realm was silent. That was not right. There was still sound. Under the bridge of helplessness, the river of forgetfulness flowed. The river of forgetfulness was also the legendary Yellow Spring. Corresponding to the Milky Way in the sky, it was the most terrifying river in the world. The 9 underworlds' weak water was in it. This river could sink all things. Goose feathers did not float, birds did not cross. Cultivators below Daluo Jingxian who fell into the river of forgetfulness would probably never be able to come up again. After looking at the bridge of helplessness, Feng Zichen subconsciously looked behind it. That was where the 6 paths of reincarnation were. What? That is, however, with this glance, Feng Zichen found that something was wrong. In the land of reincarnation that was supposed to be empty, there was a huge roulette wheel in it. Chapter 359. The roulette was not clear. It was very illusory, as if it did not exist. However, its aura was abnormally terrifying. The distance between Feng Zichen and it was a world. Even so, with just a glance, he felt a chill and fear from the bottom of his heart. It was as if he would be swallowed by the roulette in the next moment. Hiss, so powerful, so powerful. Sucking in a breath of cold air, Feng Zichen was so shocked that he took a few steps back. Even when he faced the Eastern Emperor Tai, he did not expect to be so terrified and powerless today. It was an uncontrollable panic. In front of this roulette, he felt extremely small, as if he was facing the heavenly Tao. This roulette actually gave him the illusion that he was facing the heavenly Tao. It was as if it was the Tao. The Tao should be like this. It was extremely unbelievable. It was not that Feng Zichen had never seen a primordial treasure. When he was at Kunlun Mountain, he had come into contact with the Taiji painting, the Panga banner, and the 4 immortal killing swords. He had even controlled the cauldron of heaven and earth for a period of time. However, the feeling that these primordial treasures gave him was far less powerful than the roulette in front of him. But how was this possible? Primordial treasures were already the peak of the primordial world. Heaven-splitting treasures were the peak of the peak. In the primordial world, there should not be any more powerful treasures than them. However, this roulette did it. Its aura far exceeded that of a primordial treasure, but it was not like a primordial treasure. It was between the two and was very strange. Moreover, this was not what shocked Feng Zichen the most. What shocked him even more was that this roulette was obviously not complete. It was still in the incubation stage. Its figure was extremely illusory, as if it would shatter with a poke. It was also like a ball of the origin of the Tao, constantly evolving. This formless appearance was telling Feng Zichen that it was not complete. The strength that it was displaying now was far from perfect. It had not been completely born, but it already had the strength that far exceeded that of a primordial treasure. If it was truly born, how terrifying would it be? It would probably not be weaker than a primordial treasure. When it was truly born, it might be called the number 1 primordial treasure. 6 paths of reincarnation disc. This must be the 6 paths of reincarnation disc. Only he, the legendary number 1 treasure of the netherworld and the number 1 treasure of the great desolate era, would possess such heaven-defying power. Just a wisp of his aura was enough to intimidate Daluo Jingxian and make him think that he was unstoppable. Feng Zichen forcefully calmed his mind and sighed in shock. In the netherworld there was only a single treasure that possessed such might, the 6 paths of reincarnation disc. This treasure was a supreme treasure that operated the heavens and earth. It was related to the life and death of countless living beings. He rotated life and death, making the cycle of life and death perfect in heaven and earth. He was also connected to karma and fate. This was a top-notch treasure of the primordial world. No matter how strong it would not be overboard. However, wasn't Samsara transformed into later earth? But now, the Lady of Earth hadn't even touched the edge of the blood sea, let alone reincarnation. But where did this 6 paths of reincarnation disc come from? Could it be that Samsara wasn't transformed by the later earth? Or was it not the Samsara disc? After thinking about it, Feng Zichen felt that both were possible. What if he was excited and recognized the wrong thing? After all, he had never seen the real 6 paths of reincarnation disc with his own eyes. He couldn't tell what it looked like. It was indeed difficult to distinguish the real from the fake with just a wisp of aura. It was better to take another look to distinguish the real from the fake. In fact, in Feng Zichen's heart, he vaguely felt that the possibility of the 6 paths of reincarnation not being the later earth was higher. The power of that will was too strong. There was no second one in the entire Great Desolate Era. Other than the 6 paths of reincarnation disc, it could not be anything else. However, the later earth reincarnation was his inherent impression. He had always firmly believed so since he was born. Now, he was suddenly told that reincarnation was not the later earth reincarnation. If it was anyone else, they would probably not be able to accept it for a while. Therefore, Feng Zichen decided to take another look and dispel the wisp of luck in his heart. Boom. When Feng Zichen's gaze touched the reincarnation disc again, it was as if the world had exploded, and a terrifying power erupted. The misty holy light, the churning chaotic airflow, and the energy that could split the world appeared beside the reincarnation disc, tearing everything apart and cutting off the long river of time. In the next moment, the chaos collapsed and the endless void shattered. The universe was boundless, born, and destroyed as if it was a cycle of reincarnation. Before he could react, Feng Zichen's gaze was sucked into the 6 paths of reincarnation disc. In just an instant he seemed to have experienced thousands of reincarnations, witnessed the vicissitudes of life, witnessed the change of heaven and earth, witnessed the birth and death of the universe. Gradually, an ancient and boundless aura appeared on Feng Zichen's body. It was incomparably ancient and incomparably ancient. It was an aura that had settled down after countless years, an aura that belonged to ancient living beings. At this moment, if Taoist Mingi came and felt the ancient and boundless aura on Feng Zichen's body, he would probably be even more certain of his guess. This person was definitely a supreme expert of the primordial era. However, at this moment, Feng Zichen's situation was not very good. The power of the 6 paths of reincarnation disc was too terrifying. The reincarnation of that lifetime was not as simple as life and death, but the destruction of a great world. A lifetime of reincarnation was a great world. The process from birth to destruction. Just how long would it take for that to happen? In an instant, under the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation disc, Feng Zichen had experienced thousands of reincarnations. This meant that in an instant he had witnessed the birth and death of thousands of great worlds. Moreover, as time passed, he experienced more reincarnations and witnessed more and more worlds being born and destroyed. This could be said to be a good thing. Feng Zichen's accumulation was insufficient, causing a huge flaw to appear in his state of mind. After this experience, he had witnessed the birth and death of countless worlds. With so much accumulation, he might be able to make up for his shortcomings and make up for his greatest weakness. But this was too much. In such a short period of time, Feng Zichen had experienced too many reincarnations. How old was he? Less than 1,000,000 years old. And how long would it take for a world to be born and die? The answer was 6 billion years. Of course, the great world derived from the 6 paths of reincarnation disc was not real. It was an illusion and could not exist for so long. However, the birth and death of a great world, even if it was only 1,000,000 years. Thousands of times had passed, tens of thousands of times had passed, billions of years had passed, or even tens of billions of years had passed. This time was far longer than the time Feng Zichen had existed. How could 1,000,000 years of experience be compared to 1,000,000,000 years of experience? These reincarnation experiences were enough to erase Feng Zichen's memories of the primordial world. Chapter 360. As time passed, Feng Zichen gradually realized that something was wrong. His memories of the primordial world were actually blurry. It was as if they were memories from a long time ago. Countless years had passed and he could not remember them clearly. Thousands of reincarnations and billions of years of erosion were about to make Feng Zichen lose himself. He gradually could not distinguish between illusion and reality. Was the experience of the primordial world real? Or was the experience at this moment real? At this moment, Feng Zichen's heart was abnormally conflicted. The two memories were fiercely clashing, and a wisp of confusion appeared in his eyes. Where on earth was he? What was real? What was fake? At this moment, Feng Zichen once again tasted the bitter fruit of his insufficient state of mind. Daluo Jingxian was an existence that gathered his own timeline. Time no longer had any meaning to them. Even if they accidentally fell into it, they could still calmly escape. How could they be like Feng Zichen, who was so unbearable? Under the impact of time, they did not even have the slightest strength to resist and were about to be lost in it. If this were to spread out, it would be a disgrace to Daluo Jingxian. Fortunately, Daluo Jingxian was Daluo Jingxian. At the moment when his life was threatened, Feng Zichen's primordial spirit could not help but tremble, waking him up abruptly. Not good. After coming back to his senses, Feng Zichen immediately understood his situation. Before he could think carefully, he was about to cut off the gaze that had fallen into reincarnation and cut off his connection with the 6 paths of reincarnation. Dong dong dong. At this moment, a melodious bell rang, interrupting Feng Zichen's actions. That was Hongmeng Daozhong. Under the influence of the bell, Feng Zichen's heart immediately calmed down. No matter how heaven and earth changed, how time changed, how the universe was born and destroyed, the endless reincarnation could no longer affect him in the slightest. He seemed to have transcended from the cycle of reincarnation and experienced the thousands of reincarnations from the perspective of a bystander. At the same time, the merit of creation was also shining, releasing its power to its heart's content. It raised Feng Zichen's perception to the limit, helping him to comprehend the birth and death of the universe and the principle of reincarnation. Just like that, Feng Zichen was immersed in Tao enlightenment. His state of mind was rapidly growing. The experience of thousands of lifetimes was enough for him to see through everything. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It was believed that after this, Feng Zichen's state of mind, which was caused by his rapid breakthrough, would completely disappear. It would be completely made up for, and he would even be one step closer. From then on, his shortcoming, that fatal weakness, the flaw in his heart, would no longer pose a threat to him. Only when his state of mind was perfected could his Daluo Dao fruit be truly perfected. Otherwise, it wouldn't be good for him to always look like he was lacking in mental fortitude. Along with the birth and death of the universe, endless great Dao and endless rules were spread out in front of Feng Zichen's eyes. Between the birth and death there was a great opportunity, a great creation. The birth and death of the universe, the great Tao was born and destroyed, and the rules of heaven and earth were the same. Watching the entire process was the greatest fortune and opportunity. Let's ask, in this world, was there any greater creation than personally experiencing the birth and death of the world? No, the creation of heaven and earth was the greatest creation. If not for this, Pangu wouldn't have thought of opening the sky to prove his Tao. Personally experiencing these reincarnations, the birth and death of the universe, brought immeasurable benefits to Feng Zichen. His realm was soaring, and his comprehension of the Tao was becoming deeper and deeper. With the help of the Hongmeng Daozhong and the merit of creation, this great crisis that was enough to make Feng Zichen's heart skip a beat was turned into a shocking opportunity. Fate was really unpredictable. 3 days later, Feng Zichen, who had experienced countless reincarnations, finally woke up. A wisp of purple light bloomed from his eyes, and it was exceptionally bright. At a glance, it was as if he had seen all the changes in the world and seen all the ups and downs of fate. Only 3 days had passed, but Feng Zichen had spent hundreds of millions of years in the cycle of reincarnation. Now that he had escaped from the cycle of reincarnation, he couldn't help but feel as if a lifetime had passed. Reincarnation is really magical. After cutting off some unimportant memories, Feng Zichen completely regained his senses. At this moment, his heart was filled with shock. Reincarnation was too terrifying. The experience of 3 days was equivalent to countless years of his bitter cultivation. Such a powerful ability was countless times stronger than the great Tao of time and space. Although the great Tao of time and space could also speed up cultivation, it was obvious that it couldn't help people hone their state of mind. From the experience just now, the great Tao of time and space seemed to be wrapped in the path of reincarnation. No, not only the great Tao of time and space, it seemed that all the great Taoists in the world could be found in the path of reincarnation. To be exact, the path of reincarnation was a process, a continuous cycle. From nothing to something, and from something to nothing, this process was called reincarnation. Reincarnation was a circle. There was no beginning and no end. It could also be said that the beginning was the end. Whether it was the life and death of the people, the destruction of the stars, or the birth and death of the universe, it was a continuous cycle, and it was also a kind of reincarnation. If one couldn't reach the great Tao and transcend, no one could escape the fate of reincarnation. The primordial world was no exception. Feng Zichen raised his hand and Hongmeng Qi appeared, turning into one yuan, divided into two and developed three. All kinds of innate runes were born, intertwined, and evolved into innate qi, forming an extremely small world in his hand. As soon as this world was formed, before it could develop, it shattered and turned into a ball of Hongmeng Qi again. This was also a reincarnation. After experiencing 100 reincarnations, Feng Zichen more or less understood the principle of reincarnation. Just now he was testing his path of reincarnation, using the Hongmeng Qi to deduce the birth and death of the world. Unfortunately, his understanding of the path of reincarnation was too shallow, causing the world to be destroyed as soon as it was born. Otherwise, the evolution of that small world would definitely be more perfect. Stars would be born and even life would be born. Thousands of races would compete for hegemony, forming a perfect reincarnation. The mystery of the path of reincarnation was something that people yearned for. Putting away his unnecessary thoughts, Feng Zichen looked at the 6 paths of reincarnation disc again. Comprehending the path of reincarnation was not something that could be done overnight. However, with the help of the 6 paths of reincarnation disc, the speed of comprehending the path of reincarnation would undoubtedly be greatly accelerated. At this point there was nothing to doubt. That disc was undoubtedly the #1 treasure of the primordial world, the 6 paths of reincarnation disc. It was not created by Hutu but by nature. Its power was boundless, and it was a supreme treasure that pushed the cycle of life and death. Thinking about it, although Hutu's cultivation level was not the strongest in the primordial world, it was still among the top. How many people in the primordial world were at the great perfection of sage to be? Chapter 361. However, compared to the 6 paths of reincarnation, Hutu's power was not enough. The 6 paths of reincarnation was an existence that was comparable to a chaos supreme treasure. It was countless times more powerful than a Khanate supreme treasure. Hutu's cultivation was only at the peak of the sage to be. She could not even create a Khanate supreme treasure, let alone a chaos supreme treasure. Not to mention him, even the complete innate origin of the saint's Tao into heaven and earth could only barely strengthen one innate cardinal treasure. If the origin was damaged, it would at most be a supreme grade Khanate spirit treasure. A chaos supreme treasure was the highest level of the known magic treasures. It was unsurpassable and far from being something that could be refined by humans. Even the heavenly Tao could not. This should be a supreme treasure refined by Pangu. In Feng Zichen's knowledge, apart from the great Tao, only Pangu had the ability to refine a chaos supreme treasure. After all, Pangu was too strong. Other than not having attained the Tao, he was almost omnipotent. No matter what incredible things happened to him, people would take it for granted. After personally witnessing the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation, it would be an insult to Feng Zichen's intelligence to say that reincarnation was transformed by Hutu. If Hutu had such strength, the demon clan would have been destroyed long ago. Even Hongjun could not stop her. The wizard clan had long become the main character of the world. That's true. The realm of a great Tao venerate has already reached an unimaginable level. How can he not see the importance of reincarnation to the primordial world? This should be the backup plan he left behind. After thinking for a while, Feng Zichen felt relieved. Reincarnation was refined by Pangu. Other than him and the great Tao, no one could refine such a treasure. Pangu opened up the primordial world to attain the great Tao. The process of the primordial world's birth was the process of him continuously verifying his great Tao. The appearance of reincarnation could make the primordial world more perfect. With Pangu's realm, it was impossible for him not to see it. Therefore, when the untainted land was just born, Pangu had already begun to create samsara. However, reincarnation was very important. It was an important part of the operation of the primordial world. It pushed the cycle of life and death. It was not something that a Khanate cardinal treasure could do. Thus, the reincarnation Pangu was preparing to refine was a treasure of the chaos. However, how difficult was it to refine a chaos supreme treasure? The boundless outer realm primal chaos was truly without end. It had existed for an unknown amount of time. Even so, only 3 Chaos Utmost treasures had been born. From this, one could see how precious Chaos Supreme treasures were. The creation of the Great Tao and the birth of the primal chaos were the most precious treasures in the world. If a Chaos Supreme treasure could materialize, it would not necessarily be weaker than the Chaos Demon Gods. It might even be stronger and become the leader of the Chaos Demon Gods. Its strength would be close to Pangu's. This kind of treasure, even if it was refined by the Great Tao, would have to pay a huge price, let alone Pangu, whose strength was far inferior to him. First of all, Pangu faced the problem of materials. Since the Chaos Supreme treasure was so powerful, the materials needed to refine it were naturally incomparably precious and difficult to find in the world. When refining a Chaos Supreme treasure, the Great Tao used its own Taoist rhyme in the Chaos Origin. These were extremely precious treasures, the most original materials. They could create the primal Chaos Daluo Jingxian. Its value was no less than the Hongmeng Purple Qi. However, at that time, Pangu first created the world and then killed 3,000 Chaos Demon Gods. His body was already unable to bear the burden and was on the verge of Tao disintegration. He no longer had the ability to kill his way into the depths of the chaos and forcefully take its origin. However, this did not matter. Without the Chaos Origin, he still had the Chaos Demon Gods' origin and their Chaos spiritual treasures. As the darling of the Chaos Demon Gods naturally had to be accompanied by Chaos spiritual treasures. 3,000 Chaos Demon Gods meant 3,000 Chaos spiritual treasures. In the Untainted Land, some innate fiend gods were born with several innate spiritual treasures. Some Chaos Demon Gods must have more than one Chaos spiritual treasure. Moreover, these were only the Chaos spiritual treasures that accompanied them. The chaos was so vast that it must have nurtured many Chaos spiritual treasures. According to this, the number of Chaos spiritual treasures was definitely more than 3,000. These were also formed by the Chaos Origin and contained the creation of the Great Tao. They were the best materials to refine Chaos Supreme treasures. The Chaos Demon Gods' origin and bodies were integrated into the newly born Untainted Land and became part of the origin to strengthen the Untainted Land's foundation. As for the Chaos spiritual treasures in their hands, in the creation tribulation, even the 3 Chaos Supreme treasures were smashed into pieces, let alone the Chaos spiritual treasures that were weaker than them. Naturally, they had been smashed into pieces. Some of the fragments of the Chaos spiritual treasures fell into the Untainted Land and merged with the Khanate Qi. After being nurtured by the heaven and earth, they became Khanate spiritual treasures. This was also the reason why there were so many Khanate spiritual treasures in the Untainted Land. Otherwise, with the natural nurturing of the heaven and earth, it would take countless years to produce so many Khanate spiritual treasures. How could tens of thousands of Khanate spiritual treasures be produced so quickly? It could be said that the Untainted Land could have such a grand occasion today because of the Chaos Demon Gods' corpses. It was none other than the Chaos Demon Gods who hated the Untainted Land. No one could take this lying down. The remaining fragments were collected by Pangu and used to create the 6 paths of reincarnation disc. Thousands of fragments of the Chaos spiritual treasures, together with the origin of the Untainted Land and the power left by Pangu, could definitely create a Chaos Supreme treasure. However, the more heaven-defying a treasure was, the longer it needed to be nurtured. From the time Pangu created the world until now, the reincarnation disc had been nurturing. Until today there were no signs of it being fully nurtured. This was also the reason why the Nether Realm had never appeared in the world. As a world nurtured by the origin of the heaven and earth, the Heaven Realm had been born for many years, but the Nether Realm had never appeared because it was guarding the reincarnation to prevent others from interfering with the birth of the reincarnation. Therefore, it hid in the depths of the earth and no one could find it. If not for the fact that Feng Zichen was the future lord of the Nether Realm, he would not have found its trace. After figuring this out, Feng Zichen also understood the meaning of Hudu's reincarnation. It was wrong to say that Hudu became reincarnation. It should be said that Hutu used her body to make up for reincarnation. The purpose of Hudu's visit was to fill the reincarnation with her own origin and Pangu's bloodline to promote her true birth. Reincarnation had been nurtured for too long, and there was no hope of it being born at all. Therefore, Pangu could only use external forces to speed up her birth. The wizard tribe, which was born with his bloodline, became his first choice. As for Hutu, who was naturally kind and famous for her benevolence in the Untainted Land, it could be said that she had completely inherited the moral character of the earth. She was particularly conspicuous among the tyrannical ancestral wizards. Naturally, she entered Pangu's sight and became his first choice. Chapter 362. Of course, the reincarnation was so powerful that the origin of the Hutu alone was far from enough. However, what the reincarnation wanted was not the origin of the Hutu. What he wanted was the bloodline of the Pangu in the Hutu. The Hutu was like a primer, using her sacrifice to absorb the power of the Pangu scattered in the primordial world. Her innate origin was nothing, but the power left behind by the Pangu was different. In the world, apart from the power of the great Tao, only the power of the Pangu scattered in the primordial world could accelerate the birth of reincarnation. This was an incredible power, a power beyond the imagination of the world, almost omnipotent. For some unknown reason, after the primordial world was opened, the Pangu could not appear in the world, let alone directly interfere with the development of the primordial world. Therefore, the Pangu could only use guidance to indirectly promote the development of the primordial world. Feng Zichen was like this when he obtained the world tree, and so was the Hutu's reincarnation. This was all because the Pangu was indirectly changing the primordial world through them. The primordial world is far more complicated and unfathomable than I thought. Even the Pangu has all kinds of scruples and can't act as he wants. Looking at the reincarnation, Feng Zichen couldn't help but frown. At this moment, he was convinced that the Pangu's situation might not be as good as he had imagined. Whether it was the world tree or the creation of reincarnation, the Pangu could do it himself. After all, it was too simple for him. He could do it with a wave of his hand. It was very casual. But he didn't. Not only did he not do it himself, but he also spent a lot of effort to ask others for help. This was very unreasonable. How could he leave such a big matter related to the development of the primordial world to others? What if others messed it up? This was not impossible. In the future, Feng Zichen had never heard of the world tree. From this, it could be seen that the matter of the world tree had been messed up. Moreover, the primordial world was used by the Pangu to verify his own great Tao. Of course, the stronger it was, the better. However, Feng Zichen came from the future. He was very clear about the future of the primeval world. Ever since Pangu opened the sky and the liches and demons ruled the world, the primordial world had been improving. It could be said that each era was more dazzling than the last. Countless experts emerged. Even his cultivation realm had expanded from Daluo Jingxian to primordial Daluo Jingxian. This grand occasion reached its peak during the Lich era. Tao Ancestor Tao Integration. The 6 sages reside in the world. The heavenly court guarded the vast starry sky. The sorcerer tribes suppressed the boundless land. The great divination masters roamed the world unhindered. This was an extremely glorious era. There were as many quasi-saints as dogs, and Daluo Jingxian could be found everywhere. Throughout the history of the primordial world, there had never been an era as resplendent and exciting as this one. But after the glory there was boundless darkness. Since the end of the Great Witch-Demon War, the history of the untainted land could be said to be a history of decline. Every time the cultivation tribulation passed, the level of the untainted land would regress a step, and the area of the untainted land would shrink. The cultivation environment was also getting worse and worse. During the Lich era, Daluo Jingxian could only be regarded as an expert. Only quasi-saints could shake the world. If one wanted to dominate a region, one could only hope to become a great divine ability. During the apatheicized era, Daluo Jingxian was an incredible expert. Quasi-saints could already be called peerless experts. Great divine ability was a legend. During the journey to the west, Daluo Jingxian became a legend. Tai Jingxian could dominate a region. Quasi-saints did not appear anymore, and great divine ability became a myth. After the journey to the west, immortals were the peak. The decline of the untainted land was simply shocking. Of course, this was not what Pangu wanted. But even so, Pangu did not appear in the untainted land to interfere with the progress of the untainted land. It was related to his own path. If not for the huge restrictions or his own situation, Feng Zichen did not believe that Pangu would not appear. Judging from the development of the untainted land, it was inevitable that Pangu could not directly interfere with the untainted land. That was why Feng Zichen cultivated the Tree of World and Hutu turned her body into reincarnation. That's right. That's normal. Thinking of this, Feng Zichen felt a little relieved. No matter how strong Pangu was, he had not proven the great Tao after all. There was also a limit. First, he opened up the untainted land, then killed 3,000 demon gods, and finally turned his body into heaven and earth. After doing so many things in succession, Feng Zichen did not believe that Pangu did not pay a price at all. He was seriously injured and had to sleep in the depths of the untainted land to recuperate, leaving only a wisp of divine consciousness to take care of the untainted land. That was reasonable. Otherwise, the 3,000 chaos demon gods were too useless. The combined forces of the 3,000 demon gods could not even injure Pangu, and that was under the situation where he could not use his full strength. It was impossible just thinking about it. If Pangu was really so strong, he would have proven the great Tao long ago. There was no need for him to open up the untainted land to prove his Tao. After the heavenly tribulation, Pangu was seriously injured and on the verge of death. He could not spend too much effort to take care of the untainted land. That could explain everything that happened in the untainted land. Think about it carefully. If Pangu was not seriously injured, I would not have the opportunity one have today, and I would not have the achievements I have today. After pondering for a while, Feng Zichen suddenly realized that Pangu was seriously injured. It was a great thing for him. Although it was wrong to think that way, it made sense. If Pangu had not been injured, everything he had experienced would have been very different. The belly of Mount Buzhou was the beginning of Feng Zichen and Pangu's relationship. From there, he obtained the merit of opening the heavens, the seed of the world tree, and Pangu's favor. From then on, he soared into the sky and began his legendary journey. Under the heaven-splitting merit and Pangu's care, the opportunities that others did not even dare to think about became the norm for him. There were a few times when he was in fatal danger, but he had even turned the danger into safety. It had become a great opportunity that allowed him to transform time and time again, and he had obtained astonishing fortunes. And if Pangu was not injured, just the Hongmeng Dao seal breaking the Hongmeng heaven measuring ruler was enough for Feng Zichen to die without a burial place. Nurturing the world tree and giving the heaven-splitting merit to the fated person had nothing to do with him, because he was already dead. These things, wouldn't it be better for Pangu to do it himself? In Mount Buzhou, the moment the Hongmeng Dao seal broke the Hongmeng heaven measuring ruler, Feng Zichen's fate changed. That was the turning point of his fate. It was also the beginning of his glory. To Feng Zichen, other than the Hongmeng Dao seal, Pangu was the one who helped him the most. The Hongmeng Dao seal gave him a new life. Pangu, on the other hand, gave him the hope of achieving the Dao. Without Pangu's help, Feng Zichen could achieve good results with the help of the Hongmeng Dao seal, but it was far from the glory he had today. Since I've come to the primordial world, the future of the primordial world is destined to be different. Otherwise, wouldn't I have come to the primordial world for nothing? Chapter 363. How can I be worthy of the nurturing of the great Taoist priests? At this moment, Feng Zichen found the reason why he came to the primordial world. He was here to change the primordial world. After the Lich, would the primordial world become weaker and weaker? No, it wouldn't. That was in the past. No. He was here. Everything would change for him. The primordial world would only become stronger and stronger. Not weaker and weaker. Pangu had nurtured him with all his heart. Wasn't that the reason? Otherwise, why would Pangu help him? There was no love for no reason in the world. Pangu naturally had his own purpose for helping him. And what did Feng Zichen have that was worth Pangu's schemes? After thinking about it, the only thing he could do was to change the fate of the primordial world. After the human race was done, changing the fate of the primordial world would be Feng Zichen's next goal. Under the heavenly Tao, small trends could be changed, but the general trend could not be violated. He did not care at all. With Pangu as his backing, what was there for him to be afraid of? Although the heavenly Tao was strong, what was he in front of Pangu? In the future, as long as it was beneficial to the primordial world, even if it went against the heavenly Tao, Feng Zichen could do it. The punishment of the heavenly Tao was blocked by Pangu. It could not be found on him at all. All the tribulations from the world were jokes in front of Pangu. Even though Pangu was seriously injured and was in a deep sleep, it was still the same. The primordial world was created by Pangu. How could he suffer the backlash of the primordial world? There must be a countermeasure. Being bitten by something one created was something that only happened at a low realm. The higher the realm, the less likely it was to happen. When it came to Daluo Jingxian, such a thing would never happen. They were all old monsters who had been around for many years. They could not consider anything. They would definitely eliminate this possibility. Do not underestimate any Daluo Jingxian. He was an existence that had achieved the Tao. Every person who could cultivate to this level was an outstanding talent who stood out from the countless creatures in the untainted land. They must have unimaginable wisdom. Feng Zichen was motivated again after he understood the path ahead and strengthened his belief. Pangu had helped him achieve Tao, so he could not let him down. Furthermore, even if it was to repay the kindness, he had to make the primordial world stronger. Moreover, as a member of the primordial world, it was his natural duty to make the primordial world stronger and more perfect. There was no need to consider too much. He was born here, grew up here, and fought here. Naturally, he should devote his life to it. It was the same for the human race in the primordial world. If humans did not betray him, he would not betray the human race. If the primordial world did not betray him, he would not betray the primordial world. If people respect me, I will return the favor tenfold. If someone destroys 1 grain of mine, I will take 3 bushels from him. This was Feng Zichen's principle. However, that was a matter for the future. Now, Feng Zichen's top priority was to nurture the world tree. This was the heavy responsibility that Pangu had given him, and it was also the test that Pangu had given him. Only by doing well would he be recognized by Pangu and become his spokesperson in the primordial world. At the same time, he would obtain unimaginable benefits. Mount Buzhou was broken and the sky collapsed. The origin of the primordial world was damaged because of this. Even though Nuwa had mended the sky and supported the level 4 heavenly pillar, the grade of the primordial world would inevitably decline. Therefore, the world tree was needed. If the world tree was used to support the sky, not only would the origin of the primordial world not be damaged, but it would also be replenished. The world tree was a chaos spirit root, the top spirit root. It was like the status of a chaos treasure among Dharma treasures. It could not be surpassed. Its roots could connect to the chaos outside the realm and the infinite dimensions. From these places, it could absorb a huge amount of origin to replenish the losses of the primordial world. With it around, even the origin of the primordial world would slowly recover no matter how much damage it suffered. It would even become stronger and advance further. The chaos spirit root had such a powerful power. Moreover, the world tree was a treasure that specialized in the world. This was the backup plan that Pangu had left for the primordial world. It was a backup plan that could allow the primordial world to continuously advance. Unfortunately, in the original course of history, some accident happened, causing the world tree to completely disappear in the passage of time. From then on, it was unknown and unheard of. This caused the primordial world to continuously collapse in the following battles. Perhaps it was destroyed? Thinking of the scene he saw under Mount Buzhou that day, Feng Zichen could not help but think. Under the erosion of their murderous aura, even primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian would not be able to hold on for long, let alone the seed of the world tree that had not yet grown up. Destruction was its ending. However, Feng Zichen came. Everything had changed. The world tree had passed the most dangerous stage and had grown to the half-step primordial chaos. In the primordial world there were not many things that could destroy it. As long as it grew to the level of primordial chaos, it would be able to barely support the primordial world. At that time, Feng Zichen's mission would be considered completed. Rumble. Outside the gate of hell, the 9 nether chi was mighty and rushed toward Feng Zichen, forcing him to take a few steps back. It was not until he was far away from the nether realm that the restless 9 nether chi calmed down. It seems that as long as the 6 paths of reincarnation disc is not completed, the nether realm will not allow outsiders to enter. Just now, Feng Zichen wanted to enter the nether realm with his identity as the future lord of the nether realm and see what was going on. But who knew that as soon as he approached the gate of hell, before he could do anything, the 9 nether chi that was wandering around the nether realm suddenly changed and slammed toward him like a huge wave. The oppressive cold air could freeze one's soul. Even with Feng Zichen's current realm facing such an oppressive cold, he could not help but feel danger. Not daring to take it head-on, he hurriedly dodged to the side. The power of this cold air was not inferior to the attack of a saint. It should be driven by the origin of the nether realm. Reincarnation was born in the nether realm. In order to protect him, any existence that approached the nether realm would be attacked by the nether realm. According to Feng Zichen's calculations, if he was not the future lord of the nether realm, this attack would have killed him instead of just forcing him to retreat. Reincarnation was too important, it could not be disturbed. Therefore, reincarnation did not appear and the nether realm did not appear. Even Feng Zichen, the lord of the nether realm, could not step into the nether realm at this time. However, he was still different from others. At the very least, when he approached the nether realm, he would only be expelled, not attacked. World Tree Go. After staring at the nether realm for a while, Feng Zichen suddenly had a thought and summoned the world tree. The nether realm was right in front of him. If he did not go in and take a look today, he would not be satisfied. Not to mention the many treasures that were born in the nether realm, just observing the birth of the 6 paths of reincarnation at a close distance was also a great fortune. It was of great help to him in comprehending the path of reincarnation. Chapter 364. So, this nether realm. If he could enter. It was better to make a trip there. Because the current reincarnation was not perfect, during the process of his birth, all the mysteries would be revealed and constantly deduced to approach perfection. And when the reincarnation was completely born, his power would be restrained. Other than his master, outsiders could only feel his strength, but they would no longer be able to sense the path and truth contained in him. Therefore, this was the best time for Feng Zichen to comprehend the path of reincarnation. If he missed it, he would definitely regret it for the rest of his life. Entering the nether realm, regardless of whether he succeeded or not, he had to give it a try so that he would not leave any regrets. Yes, Feng Zichen could not enter the nether realm, but that did not mean that he had no other way. The world tree was the way he thought of. As a top-grade spiritual root that coexisted with the world, it was the instinct of the world tree to connect with other worlds. His roots could ignore all boundary walls and obstacles and enter any world at will. This was the world tree. If it did not have such power, how could it be called the chaos spiritual root? Of course, the world tree was magical and the nether realm was not weak. Now, the world tree was far from reaching its most perfect state. Facing the powerful nether realm, it might not be able to break through its defense. But how would he know if he did not try? If he succeeded, there would be a great creation. If he failed, there would be no loss. Anyway, nothing would happen, so why not give it a try? Silently, the world tree walked out of the chaos bead and came to Feng Zichen's side, standing in the void. Whoosh! A root stretched out from the world tree, broke through the layers of void, and rushed toward the interior of the nether realm. Sensing the invasion of a foreign object, the will of the nether realm immediately reacted. It mobilized the surrounding aura of the 9 underworlds and rushed toward the roots of the world tree. At the same time, in the deepest part of the ancient hell in the nether realm, a ball of white flames appeared. With an aura that could freeze everything, it flew out of the nether realm and headed toward the roots of the world tree. It was the fire of hell, the purest fire of hell. The chill on its body was not the innate chill, nor was it the chill of the 9 underworlds, but the chill released by the path of extreme Yin. This ball of hellfire was no longer composed of 9 hell's chi, but of innate extreme Yin origin. Its essence had long been sublimated. This was the most terrifying hellfire that could burn a golden immortal to death. The change in color from black to white was a sign of the limit. Hellfire surged towards him. Its power was strong enough to make Feng Zichen's expression change. He didn't dare to let it get close to him. Unfortunately, its opponent was not Feng Zichen but the Tree of World. The nemesis of all energy, the World Tree. As a supreme spiritual root nurtured by chaos, the World Tree could devour all forms of energy. No matter if it was good, bad, congenital, or acquired, as long as it did not exceed his tolerance, he could devour it and turn it into nutrients for his growth. The World Tree could even directly devour the violent chaos chi, let alone the hellfire derived from the innate extreme Yin origin. It was the best tonic for the World Tree. Crack crack. Wherever the hellfire passed, a powerful chill was released. The void was condensed, making cracking sounds. Then it turned into fragments and fell. However, such a powerful force was completely useless against the Tree of World. Instead, it was suppressed by the Tree of World, and it could not even put up a decent resistance. As soon as the hellfire touched the roots of the World Tree, the roots of the World Tree swept across and blasted it into pieces before it could do anything. Then, without waiting for the hellfire to condense again, the rest of the roots of the World Tree whizzed over and devoured it. Along the way, the 9 hell's chi that came with the hellfire was also devoured by the World Tree. Although the nether realm was strong, it was only a part of the primitive world. It was far less powerful than the primitive world. In addition, reincarnation hadn't started. Most of its power was limited to nurturing reincarnation. As a result, its power that was comparable to a saint's could not be used. It could only barely reach the half-step primordial chaos level. This power was more than enough to deal with Feng Zichen. However, it was far from enough to deal with the World Tree, which was also a half-step primordial chaos level. In an instant, the World Tree broke through the layers of defense of the nether realm and came to its side. A soft light bloomed on the roots of the World Tree. It seemed to have thousands of colors, including all the colors in the world. At this moment, The world tree seemed to have merged with the void and squeezed toward the interior of the nether realm. However, this action completely angered the will of the nether realm. In the sky above the nether realm, the great path law appeared, and the aura of death filled the air. That was the path of death. The nether realm was a world of death. It was a world that relied on the path of death to exist. It was the home of all souls. When it was extremely angry, it could completely trigger the descent of the path of death. In this world, no one could escape death, especially in front of the path of death. It seemed that under its power, even Daluo Jingxian would die. This death was not a complete disappearance. Instead, it was being transformed into a life form and living in another way. A way of death. Everything was the opposite of life. This was the enlightenment that Feng Zichen had after seeing the path of death. Faintly, after the appearance of the path of death, there was even a resonance between them. An inexplicable attraction came, inducing Feng Zichen to throw himself into the embrace of the path of death. That was not a bad thing, because Feng Zichen had a feeling. It seemed that as long as he threw himself into the embrace of the path of death, he would be able to directly prove his path and become the path master of the path of death. He would become the strongest among Daluo Jingxian in one fell swoop. Even the path after the quasi-saint was paved for him. Once the calamity was over, he would become a great magician of the primordial world. A beautiful future was right in front of his eyes. As long as he threw himself into the embrace of the path of death. In the next moment, under the powerful temptation, Feng Zichen almost took a step forward and walked toward the path of death. However, his strong temperament prompted him to calm down in an instant and forcefully stop his footsteps. It was not because there was a trap in this matter, but because although the path of death was good, it was obvious that it was not as good as the path of reincarnation. If he went to comprehend the path of death now, he would definitely miss the opportunity to comprehend the path of reincarnation. Therefore he could not go. The path of death was there and he could comprehend it at any time. However, there was only one opportunity to comprehend the path of reincarnation. If he missed it, he would miss it forever. Feng Zichen naturally understood which was more important. As for why he was so sure, the path of death was not a trap, but an opportunity that belonged to him. That was because Feng Zichen's incarnation, the Ghost Emperor of Fengdu, was a ghost. The first ghost of the primordial world. Chapter 365. Ghost. It was a living being that survived in the form of death. They were different from living beings and were the embodiment of the path of death. In the primordial world, first, it often represented great luck and great potential. It was very easy for any existence that occupied one to obtain extraordinary achievements, surpassing everything else and becoming a famous existence. Tao ancestor Hongjun was the first living being in the primordial world. His strength was the undisputed number one in the primordial world. The teacher of all saints had already explained everything. As the first dragon of the primordial world, the strength of the ancestral dragon was recognized by all races. The 100 beasts facing the sky was the embodiment of his strength. Di Jun, the first living being born in the sun, was also the first demon of the primordial world. He was the heavenly emperor, the master of the universe. Di Jiang, the first living being born from Pengu's blood essence, was also the first shaman of the primordial world. The Lord of Space, the Lord of the Earth. All of these were all showing the extraordinariness of being first. As the first postnatal living being, Feng Zichen was also born with supreme luck. It was just that the postnatal era had yet to arrive and was suppressed by the environment of heaven and earth. His luck could not be manifested, so he did not enjoy all kinds of benefits. However, when the postnatal era arrived, Feng Zichen was destined to become glorious and become the postnatal Dao ancestor. Just like Dao ancestor Hongjun in the eyes of the postnatal living beings, Feng Zichen was the same in the eyes of the postnatal living beings. And Fengdu was the same. He was the first ghost in the world. His appearance perfected the path of death. It could be said that he was a god-fiend born with the luck of the path of death. He was the natural path of death. Especially when he opened up the path of ghost and completely clarified the definition of ghost, allowing all living beings in the primordial world to turn into ghosts after they died. This undoubtedly increased the power of the path of death greatly. In this world there was no love for no reason. Feng Zichen had brought so many benefits to the path of death. Of course he had to express his gratitude. Therefore, after sensing Feng Zichen's aura, the path of death would naturally throw out an olive branch and give him more strength so that he could better develop the path of ghost and strengthen the power of death. As long as Feng Zichen's Fengdu incarnation was still around, the Tao of Death would always favor him, because he had become the spokesperson of the way of death in the primordial world. Therefore, as long as he wanted to, he could attain the Tao at any time. He had become the Death Tao Lord. As for the Tao of Death, it wouldn't care about such things. It was fine as long as Feng Zichen was alive. As long as he was alive, he represented the life side of the path of death. He would always exist and strengthen the path of death. Therefore, as long as Feng Zichen was alive, everything would be fine. In order to let him live well, the path of death didn't mind releasing his authority to him, allowing him to attain the path at any time. The great Tao of heaven and earth had no wisdom. The meaning of their existence was to stabilize the order of the untainted land and become stronger. Becoming stronger was their only pursuit, and those who could satisfy their pursuit were bound to receive their full support. This was why the Tao of Death was so friendly to Feng Zichen. Because Feng Zichen could make him even more powerful. The Tao of Death, with his body, Fengdu incarnation. It had a heaven-sent opportunity. If he didn't take it this time, there would be a next time and a time after that. No one could take it away. It could only belong to him. But reincarnation, it was different. That was the opportunity that Pangu had prepared for the Hutu and the wizard race. No one could take it away. Saints couldn't and Feng Zichen couldn't. Therefore, for the sake of the path of reincarnation, the path of death could only be put behind. While Feng Zichen was hesitating, the path of death in the netherworld made a move. Boundless rules hung down and turned into divine chains of order. With the aura of death, they attacked the tree of world. That power was enough to make a quasi-saint's expression change. Unfortunately, it encountered the tree of world. That was a treasure born from chaos. There was no concept of life and death at all. The only thing that remained was chaos. So what if it was born? So what if it was dead? For creatures born in chaos, it was completely meaningless. They had long transcended life and death. They were no longer in the category of life and death. In their eyes, there were only things that existed and things that didn't exist. And whether it was life or death, it was a state of existence. Therefore, whether it was life or death, it didn't have much impact on them. It couldn't change their essence. Existence and non-existence. It represented existence and non-existence. That was the most essential principle of the universe, far beyond life and death. As long as it still existed, there were infinite possibilities. And if it didn't exist, it was nothing. There was nothing and it was completely cut off. Therefore, what could make the creatures of chaos despair and fear did not exist. Death was meaningless to them. The chaos demon god was killed by Pangu and his true spirit was suppressed under Mount Bujo. But other than hatred, they didn't show any signs of anxiety. They didn't break Pangu's seal at all costs. That was because they still existed. There was still hope for them to turn the tables. They didn't feel despair. They could calmly carry out their plan to erode Mount Bujo and wait for the day when they could escape. A moment of entrapment didn't mean anything. It was just an insignificant part of their long lives. It was like taking a nap. If their bodies were gone, they could refine again. If their magic treasures were gone, they could find another one. If they didn't exist, they would have nothing. Therefore, existence was the only thing they cared about. It was their bottom line. As long as they still existed, nothing was so important. They could endure it. If Pangu had made them feel despair and wanted to erase their existence, then Pangu would have killed them. Without a doubt, these chaos demon gods would definitely risk their lives to fight Pangu. And this war would definitely be more terrifying than the tribulation of splitting open the sky. Because Pangu split open the sky to destroy the home of the chaos demon gods, not to take their lives. Therefore, although the chaos demon gods were angry, they would definitely not risk everything to fight Pangu. After all, no matter how extraordinary the primordial world was, it was far from being comparable to the chaos. The primordial world was also a part of the chaos. One day it would return to the embrace of the chaos. It came from the chaos and left from the chaos. This was reincarnation and also fate. No one could escape. With the realm of the chaos demon gods, it was impossible for them not to understand this. Therefore, the tribulation of splitting open the sky. It was a battle between the chaos demon gods and Pangu, not a battle of life and death. Although it was tragic, it was far from the level of life and death. Did you see any chaos demon gods fall in the tribulation? No. Pangu didn't want to kill the chaos demon gods, nor did he dare to. Otherwise, when it came to a battle of life and death, even the great Tao would tremble if 3,000 chaos demon gods attacked at all costs, let alone Pangu. They were all chaos demon gods. No matter how big the gap was, it was impossible for one to kill all the other chaos demon gods alone. If one didn't reach the Great Tao, one would eventually run out of strength. Chapter 366. The Chaos Demon Gods wanted to destroy the primordial world only because they could not take it lying down. It was not that they did not want to destroy the primordial world. They would die. Imagine if someone destroyed your home and brazenly built a new house on the old side of your home and even lived there openly. Who would be able to tolerate this? Of course, the Chaos Demon Gods could not tolerate it. If they did not destroy the primordial world, they would definitely not take it lying down. Moreover, the primordial world was right under their noses. They had been watching it all this time. It was really disgusting. It was better to destroy it. Out of sight, out of mind. A dispute of personal feelings would not involve the root. Therefore, although the primordial world seemed dangerous, it could always exist in the chaos. Because the Chaos Demon Gods did not have the courage to put all their eggs in one basket. In their opinion, it was stupid to sacrifice everything in order to destroy the primordial world. In their understanding, in this world, other than the chaos, there was no world that existed forever. Perhaps even the chaos would be destroyed one day. From nothing to nothing, from nothing to something. It was a fateful cycle that no one could escape. The primordial world was destined to be destroyed. It was just a matter of time. It was not worth it to sacrifice everything in order to destroy a world that was destined to be destroyed. The Chaos Demon Gods were not fools. Of course they would not do it. However, they were still very happy to cause some trouble for the primordial world so as to make things difficult for Pangu. After all, this would allow them to vent the anger in their hearts. Moreover, the more anxious Pangu was, the easier it would be for them to vent their anger. That was also the reason why the Chaos Demon Gods kept harassing the primordial world. They did not necessarily want to destroy the primordial world. Perhaps they just wanted to cause trouble for the primordial world? No matter what, the primordial world was the place where Pangu developed his Tao. If they really destroyed him, they would have a death feud with Pangu. The feud of blocking the Tao would not end until they were dead. That was not a joke. If they really destroyed the primordial world, perhaps the Chaos Demon Gods would not be happy. Pangu's revenge was not something that anyone could bear. In a high-level confrontation, unless the bottom line was touched, it was very difficult for a life-and-death battle to occur. On the one hand, it was because at their level, there were not many things that they cared about. On the other hand, it was also an extremely important aspect. The higher one's cultivation level was, the harder it was for one to die. Immortality and indestructibility were the standard for high-level beings. At that level, it was easy to distinguish between life and death. It was almost impossible to kill an existence of the same level. To be able to cultivate to that level, which one of them wasn't a prodigy? Which one of them wasn't a person above others? No matter how bad it was, how bad could it be? Even if he managed to kill it, the price he would have to pay would be unimaginable. Scheming for eternity and suppressing others with power was the normal state of that realm. Life and death was a last resort. The divine chains of order formed by the Tao of Death shot forward and bound the Tree of World in an instant. The terrifying origin of death spread out and surged into the World Tree's body, trying to wipe out its vitality and pull it into the embrace of death. However, the World Tree had no concept of life and death. The so-called origin of death was also one of the nutrients it needed to grow. The Tao of Death wanted to use the origin of death to wipe out its vitality, but it was a fool's dream. A misty green light bloomed. The origin of death that surged into the World Tree's body was immediately absorbed by it and transformed into the nutrients it needed to grow. Even so, the World Tree was still not satisfied. It waved its roots and took the initiative to reach out to the divine chains of order that wrapped around its body to absorb more origin of death. Gradually, the Tao of Death began to realize that something was wrong, so it withdrew the origin of death and stopped releasing it. Instead, it relied on its powerful strength to entangle the World Tree and pull it to an unknown place, preventing it from approaching the netherworld. No matter what, the Tao of Death was still the Tao of heaven and earth. Its power was absolutely strong. It couldn't destroy the World Tree, but it could still pull it. Rumble. No matter how the World Tree struggled and stirred up the surrounding void, it couldn't break free from the divine chains of order formed by the Tao of Death. It could only move bit by bit to an unknown place, gradually leaving the netherworld. Not good. Seeing this, Feng Zichen was shocked. He wasn't worried about the World Tree. He didn't need to worry about the World Tree. It was a supreme treasure left behind by Pangu. Anyone could hurt it except for the untainted world. The Tao of Death would at most seal the World Tree for a period of time. It wouldn't hurt it and might even give it some benefits. What Feng Zichen was worried about was that if the world tree was really pulled away by the Tao of Death, his plan to enter the netherworld would be ruined. This must not happen. After thinking for a while, Feng Zichen suddenly took out the seal of Fengdu. He activated all his dermic powers and pushed its power to the limit. Then he pressed it against the world tree. Suddenly, a thin layer of black gas appeared on the world tree. It was unusually eerie and emitted a different kind of chill. This was ghost chi. It was a special power created by the combination of the death chi and the 9 underworlds chi. It was also a manifestation of the Tao of Death. It was a power that had never appeared before. After the ghost chi appeared, it resonated with the Tao of Death and faintly showed signs of merging into one. Affected by this, the Tao of Death's movements suddenly stopped. The world tree also stopped moving. Clang. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Feng Zichen knocked on the Hongmeng Daozhong. Suddenly, the Hongmeng Qi poured out and wrapped around the roots of the world tree. It rushed toward the netherworld. After a while, the Tao of Death became familiar with the power of the ghost Qi. It suddenly came back to its senses and hurriedly chased after the world tree. But it was too late. The world tree had the ability to break the boundary wall. The Hongmeng Qi had the characteristic of ignoring all restrictions. The combination of the two was not as simple as 1 plus 1. Moreover, this was in the netherworld. It didn't have time to react. Noiselessly, a crack appeared in the boundary wall of the netherworld realm. It was extremely small, but it truly existed. Now, with a thought, Feng Zichen hurriedly activated the Hongmeng Daozhong. It turned into an extremely small ray of light and entered the netherworld through the crack. At this time, the netherworld and the Tao of Death finally reacted and hurriedly repaired the crack. At the same time, in the netherworld, the will of the netherworld appeared and swept through every corner. It didn't miss a single spot trying to find traces of the intruder. However, the power of the Hongmeng Daozhong was so mysterious that it could even block the perception of the heavenly Tao, let alone the will of the netherworld. After Feng Zichen entered the netherworld, the Hongmeng Daozhong shook slightly. Its body evolved and turned into various kinds of innate vitality. Finally, it turned into a cloud of 9 underworlds chi and completely merged with the netherworld, becoming a part of it. Chapter 367. The vast will swept through the nether realm again and again, but it did not find the slightest abnormality. It was as if no one had barged in just now. After a long time, the will of the nether realm, which could not detect any abnormalities, slowly retreated. The nether realm also returned to its calm state. After a long while, the aura of the 9 nether that Feng Zichen had transformed into moved and slowly floated toward hell. That's right, it was either reincarnation or hell. The moment he entered the nether realm, an inexplicable call suddenly came from the depths of hell. It was as if there was something extremely important to him there, constantly tugging at his mind and urging him to rush there. This feeling was a whim, a long-lost whim. In a trance, Feng Zichen understood, there, in the depths of hell, there was a treasure that was fated to be with him. Most cultivators were extremely sensitive to things related to themselves. Regardless of whether it was good or bad, they would often be able to sense it in advance and feel it in their hearts before it happened. This was called a whim. This was the instinct of cultivators, and it was also one of the benefits of cultivation. There was no need to cultivate and one could naturally have it. Moreover, it would become stronger as one's realm increased. It was because there were all kinds of incredible benefits that the people of the world would rush to cultivate and think of all ways to improve their cultivation. The pleasure brought by the improvement of one's realm would not be understood if one had not experienced it. That feeling was incomparably wonderful. After hesitating for a moment, the curiosity in his heart prevailed in the end, leading Feng Zichen to walk in the direction of hell, collecting a spirit treasure. It should not take much time. Feng Zichen was not surprised that there was a treasure in hell that was fated to be with him. He was the emperor of Fengdu, the original master of hell. Everything in hell belonged to him. Wasn't it normal for him to sense the birth of a treasure in hell? The nether realm was empty. There was no sign of life. Everything remained the same as before. Along the way, Feng Zichen did not encounter any obstacles. Very smoothly he arrived outside hell. At this time Hongmeng Daozhong shook again, and Feng Zichen's body suddenly changed. The 9 nether chi turned into hellfire and he wobbled into hell. Moreover, as he continued to go deeper into hell, the color of the hellfire he transformed into became darker and more powerful. This was to harmonize with the surrounding environment to prevent the hellfire from backfiring. In the end, Feng Zichen was only the future lord of hell. Now he was not. He had to wait for the nether realm to appear. Only by relying on the providence of opening up the ghost path would he be able to rightfully control hell and the nether realm. With his current strength, without the support of the karmic rank, it would be quite troublesome to deal with the fire of hell in the depths of hell. It was better to keep a low profile. If things got out of hand, he would not only have to deal with hell but also the netherworld. Huff, huff. The vastness of hell far exceeded that of the upper-class world. It was comparable to any heaven in the heaven realm. With Feng Zichen's speed and the help of Hongmeng Daozhong, it took him several years to reach the core of hell, where the treasure was located. Looking at the huge black ball of light in front of him, Feng Zichen was a little shocked for a moment. What was that? The black on its body was so pure. There was not the slightest flaw. It was so black that it made people despair. Especially the aura on its body, it was different from before. It was no longer the chill unique to hell but evil, the ultimate evil in the world. Looking at it, Feng Zichen felt as if he had seen despair and all the evil in the world. In the depths of the black ball of light, he even saw endless sins and the chilling karma. It was as if it was a collection of evil, bearing all the sins in the world, so much so that it gathered unimaginable karma. It was the embodiment of evil, the source of sin, and the beginning of despair. Just by looking at it, Feng Zichen felt that he had been infected by its power. He fell into the abyss of despair and continued to sink deeper and deeper. Despair, endless despair. As far as the eye could see, there was nothing but despair. Even the future was dark and hopeless. His heart was silent. His Tao gradually lost its vitality. Under the power of this ball of light, Feng Zichen's Tao heart was sinking and gradually walking towards death. Boom. Just as Feng Zichen's life was about to be threatened, the black ball of light suddenly changed and let out a loud roar, waking Feng Zichen up from his despair. So powerful! After coming back to his senses, Feng Zichen could not help but break out in a cold sweat. The netherworld was indeed the world of death. It was extremely dangerous and full of dangers. If he was not careful, even Daluo Jingxian would be in danger of dying. After a while, Feng Zichen looked at the black ball of light again and found that everything was different. At this moment, what enveloped it was no longer the endless evil and despair, but the Tao and truth. That was the Tao of evil. It was the Tao of sin. It was the Tao of despair. It was also the Tao of death. All kinds of great Tao appeared on its body and turned into rules, explaining the truth of great Tao to Feng Zichen. The origin of hell. In a trance, Feng Zichen understood the origin of this thing. It was the innate origin of hell, the foundation of hell. Controlling it was equivalent to controlling the entire hell. This was originally his authority. It was also because it sensed his aura that the origin of hell would appear and attract him. Without any hesitation, Feng Zichen immediately took a step forward and gently touched the origin of hell. Immediately, the origin of hell trembled violently. Wisps of light appeared and flowed along Feng Zichen's arm into his body, fusing with him. Powerful. Unprecedentedly powerful. With the influx of the origin of hell, Feng Zichen's strength soared. In a few breaths, he broke through the limits of Daluo Jingxian and reached the quasi-saint level, and he was still growing. It was not until the origin of hell completely poured into his body that his strength stopped growing. At this moment, his strength had reached the limit of a quasi-saint, and he was about to break through to the level of primordial chaos. At this moment, Feng Zichen had an illusion that in the netherworld, in hell, he was invincible and could almost face a saint. No, this was not an illusion. This was the truth. At this moment he was not only him, but also the Lord of Hell. His every move was enhanced by the origin of hell. Not only could he mobilize the power of hell, but he could also mobilize the power of the netherworld. He could be said to be extremely powerful, and his strength was close to that of a saint. To be his enemy was to be the enemy of hell, was to be the enemy of the netherworld. In this way, how many people in this world could be his enemy? Chapter 368. What a pity. After a long while, Feng Zichen said with a face full of regret. Such a powerful force naturally had restrictions and could not be used as he wished. This power came from hell, from the netherworld, so it could only be used in the netherworld. Out of the netherworld, all the mighty forces would disappear. Yi Fengdu was still an ordinary golden immortal. That's right. It's an external force, so why ask for too much? In just an instant, Feng Zichen adjusted his mentality. The power of hell was just icing on the cake for him. It would be better if he had it, but it would not affect him much if he did not. His clone was born with the fate of death. He could not guarantee whether he could become the primordial chaos Daluo Jinxian. But it was definitely not difficult to become a great divine power. He would have the power that the origin of hell gave him sooner or later. Therefore he would not care too much. Besides, he was the Ghost Emperor. It was enough for him to stay in the Netherworld. Why would he go to the primordial world for no reason? With a thought, Feng Zichen decided the future of this clone. He would not leave the Netherworld easily until he became a great divine power. In this way, the restrictions of hell's power did not exist for him. Whoosh! Suddenly Feng Zichen's mind moved. The origin of hell gushed out from his body and turned into a ball of light again, suspended in mid-air. Pagoda, go! Then Feng Zichen waved his sleeve and the pagoda appeared. It spun in the air for a moment and plunged into the origin of hell. One could see that after the pagoda entered the origin of hell, it suddenly began to decompose. Wisps of the true meaning of death flowed out from its body and merged into the origin of hell. The pagoda was a treasure that corresponded to the path of death. It was the proud work of the demon ancestor Rahu. He wanted to use it to seize the authority of death. This was the treasure he used to achieve his path. It gathered the death aura of the entire ancient era and gave birth to 18 death realms. Each death realm was the best in the upper-class world. Such a treasure was difficult to find in the primordial world. Its power was unimaginably strong. Hell was divided into 18 levels and so was the Buddha Pagoda. Therefore, the moment he obtained it, Feng Zichen's first thought was the 18 levels of hell. It was a magical treasure that corresponded to the 18 hells. The 18 death realms it nurtured were the best embryos for the 18 hells. In the future, the 18 levels of hell were 18 extremely powerful greater thousand worlds. They were created at great cost by the Buddhist sect. As for Feng Zichen, if he wanted to create the 18 levels of hell before the Buddhist sects to establish his prestige, he would have to prepare 18 greater worlds. However, with his current strength, if he wanted to open up a greater thousand world, he would have to achieve the Tao and transform heaven and earth, using everything he had to evolve the world. A greater thousand world required him to pay the price of his own death in order to establish it. Moreover, he had opened 18 greater worlds in a row. Feng Zichen could not do it at all. Of course. Even if he could do it, he would not do it, nor could he do it. Since he was already dead, what was the point of opening up the 18 levels of hell? Such selflessness was not Feng Zichen's style. He did things. First for himself. Then for the human race. Finally, for the primordial world. Sacrificing himself for others. This was not him. Even he could not be so great. The pagoda was fated to be in hell. Integrating it into hell could not only strengthen the origin of hell, but also open up the 18 levels of hell. It could be said to be killing several birds with one stone. It also solved Feng Zichen's big problem. Thinking about it, the hell created by this treasure would definitely be stronger and more perfect than the hell created by the Buddhist sect. It might be able to suppress a quasi-saint. When the netherworld realm appears, Fengdu will be famous in the primordial world. It would take some time to break down the pagoda. Of course, Feng Zichen could not wait here. He took one last look at the origin of hell and turned to leave. With the netherworld realm as his backing, Fengdu would definitely become a great divine power. Even if there were restrictions, he would still be a great divine power. It was enough to shock the primordial world. Walking in the netherworld realm and breathing in the aura of the 9 underworlds, Feng Zichen felt that his entire body was transparent. Now that he had obtained the origin of hell, he could walk freely in the netherworld realm without worrying about being discovered by the will of the netherworld. This is the netherworld realm. It's simply the holy land of ghost cultivators. After walking for a while, Feng Zichen suddenly sighed. In just a short while, bathing in the aura of the 9 underworlds, his body seemed to have been baptized. He became more transparent and light. One had to know that he was Daluo Jinxian. Even he could sense the obvious benefits, let alone those low-level cultivators. If they were in such a cultivation environment for a long time, their cultivation progress could only be described as rapid. The treasure land. The place where the ghost path thrives. It has to be here. On the way to the land of reincarnation, Feng Zichen became more and more excited the more he thought about it. Compared to the netherworld realm, the Fengdu Luoshan that he had spent so much effort to create seemed a little inferior. Living in such an environment, even a pig would be able to achieve the immortal karma rank with the help of the 9 nether chi, even if it only ate and slept well all day long. If one worked a little harder, it would not be difficult to become a golden immortal. Those who were talented and willing to endure hardships, Tai Jingxian was right in front of them. As for Daluo Jingxian, then they could only rely on luck. Even saints could not guarantee that every one of their disciples would be able to cultivate Daluo Jingxian. Feng Zichen of course not. Tens of thousands of ghosts gathered in Fengdu City. It was not impossible to recreate the grand occasion of the Lich. As long as the ghost path had 1/10 of the strength of the demon clan after the Lich and demon calamity, it could be considered a top force in the primordial world. Even saints could not be taken lightly. Perhaps, under his rule, the underworld would no longer be a subordinate organization of the heavenly court, but an existence on the same level. One ruled the living. One ruled the dead. They were equal to each other, but they did not interfere with each other. Thus, they reached a subtle balance and managed the primordial world together. Of course, this was only Feng Zichen's beautiful wish, or rather, the goal that he was working hard for. Being inferior to others, in the end it still made people unhappy. If he wanted to do it, he had to be the strongest. The Netherworld realm was originally a world on par with the Heaven realm. There was no reason that the heavenly court established in the Heaven realm had a higher status than the underworld established in the Netherworld realm. They should be equal. In the later generations, the underworld was under the jurisdiction of the heavenly court. It was obviously abnormal. The balance of yin and yang was the right principle of heaven and earth. What Feng Zichen wanted to do was to bring this abnormal relationship back on track. Let the underworld have the dignity that it should have. The world of the dead should not be weaker than the living. No, in the future, the underworld could not be called the underworld, nor could it be called the underworld. Instead, it should be called the underworld court. The underworld. These two names were really not worthy of the Netherworld realm, which was as famous as the Heaven realm. Chapter 369. In Court. This title was domineering. If it was spread out, it would also sound good. Otherwise, if he called himself the Yin Master of the Underworld, he would be inferior to the Heavenly Court in name. How could he compete with him? Since he wanted to compete, then he had to start from the basics. First of all, he could not be weak in terms of reputation. It did not matter if he did not have the strength, but he had to show off his reputation. The name represented the luck of heaven and earth. Could not be taken lightly. This was a magical power that could often play an unexpected role. The future of the primordial world, it will change in my hands. Feng Zichen was a little excited when he thought of the future separation of heaven and earth. If this matter was successful, he would have completed a part of his plan to change the primordial world. The Yin Court of the Underworld was a major event that would change the primordial world. The fate of the primordial world would be controlled by him. How could this not be exciting? Anyone in this situation would not be able to remain calm. Moreover, Feng Zichen had also thought of a way to let the Yin Court compete with the Heavenly Court. The reason why the Heavenly Court could shock the primordial world was because of Zhouxing, Dijun, Taifushi, and the endless demon race. If the Yin Court wanted to compete with him, they could only borrow the power of the Magi. In the primordial world, only the Magi could compete with the demon race and even faintly defeat them. Moreover, there was an inseparable relationship between the Magi and the Netherworld. But that was the Lord of Samsara. Her status was even higher than Fengdu, the Lord of the Netherworld. She was not inferior to a saint at all. She was the true supreme karmic position of the world. With him around, the Magi could also be said to be the master of the Netherworld. If the Magi moved into the Netherworld, they would have the 6 paths of reincarnation, the 12 ancestors of the Magi, and the experts of the Magi. The Yin Court was the true Yin Court, and it could completely compete with the Heavenly Court. Perhaps, this was the beginning of the change in the fate of the primordial world. Wait. The Magi, the Netherworld. This. Thinking of the relationship between the Magi and the Netherworld, Feng Zichen's mind suddenly stirred as he discovered a shocking secret. The Netherworld was the holy land of ghost cultivators. The 9 underworlds chi could temper the primordial spirit. Living in the Nether realm for a long time, even if one did not cultivate much, under the influence of the 9 underworlds chi, one's origin spirit would slowly become stronger. However, the sorcerer tribe did not have primordial spirits. No, it was not that the Magi did not have primordial spirits. It was just that his primordial spirit was too weak. In the process of cultivation, it was absorbed by his powerful physical body and became a part of his body. If the shamans were allowed to live in the Nether realm, it was hard to say what would happen to those powerful shamans. However, there was a high chance that the newborn Magi would be baptized by the 9 Nether Chi and give birth to essence souls. They would be no different from other living beings in the primordial world. Thinking about it carefully, the birth of the nether world seemed to have been specially prepared for the shaman tribe to make up for the shaman tribe's flaws. Otherwise, why did the shamans benefit the most? If that's the case, it's not unreasonable. The Magi are the descendants of Pengu after all. It's only natural that they take care of them. It was human nature to leave some benefits for their descendants. If it was Feng Zichen, he would do the same. There was nothing incomprehensible about it. The Magi worshipped Pengu, and their attitude towards him far exceeded that of the three pure ones, who were also descendants of Pengu. It was normal for Pengu to be biased towards them. Unfortunately, although Pengu's plan was good, he miscalculated. If the nether realm could be born together with the heaven realm, the Magi would have long become the main characters of the world. But it's too late to be born now. Thinking of the ending of the Magi in the future, Feng Zichen was silent for a moment. Even someone as strong as Pengu could not control everything in the primordial world. There were times when he was helpless. Using the nether realm to make up for the flaws of the Magi, so that the Magi could become the main characters of the world and dominate the primordial world. Their relationship would not be in vain. However, plans could not keep up with changes. Something that Pengu could not control happened. Reincarnation. It was too powerful. As a result, its gestation time far exceeded Pengu's expectations. Even when it was the age of the Magi, there were no signs of its birth. Reincarnation did not appear for a long time, dragging down the timing of the nether realm's birth, causing it to be unable to be born. Helpless, Pengu could only use the power of the Lady of Earth to forcefully create reincarnation. But at this moment, the fate of the Magi was set. They would definitely be defeated. This was the general trend of the heavenly Tao. How could it be reversed by the nether realm? His birth could not change anything. Otherwise, how could the monstrous negative karma accumulated by the Magi be eliminated? How could the karma with the billions of living beings in the primordial world be resolved? These were the sins of the Magi. If this sin was not punished, how could the heavenly Tao show its fairness? Being impartial was the foundation of the existence of the heavenly Tao, and it was also the foundation of maintaining the order of the world. If this concept was lost, the heavenly Tao would no longer be the heavenly Tao if it had selfish motives. The primordial world would also fall into chaos because of this. Therefore, if they were guilty, they had to be punished. Even saints were no exception. Not to mention the Magi and demons. If the Magi and demons were not punished, it was not enough to correct the heavenly law, not enough to anger the commoners, and not enough to show the fairness of the heavenly Tao. The Magi had to be punished. They had to pay the price for everything they had done. It was precisely because he understood this principle that Feng Zichen, who was determined to change the primordial world, had no intention of changing the fate of the Magi and demons. Did he not know that as long as he changed the fate of the Magi and demons, the future of the primordial world would definitely change and walk into the unknown? He knew, of course he knew. But he could not do it. The negative karma that the Magi and demons carried was too heavy. Even if it was converted to saints, it was enough to pull them down from their positions as saints. Feng Zichen could not bear such karma at all. He could not solve it, nor did he dare to accept it. If he touched it, he would die. No one in the primordial world could touch it. Sigh. The Magi have already made a big mistake. Their negative karma is deep and there is no way to save them. Even if the nether realm is given to them, they can't change their fate. Therefore, the fate between the nether realm and the Magi is limited. That's why Fengdu was born to replace the Magi and rule the nether realm. After understanding this, Feng Zichen had a further understanding of the relationship between Fengdu, the Magi, and the nether realm. The appearance of the nether realm was too late. It was so late that it could not change the fate of its master of destiny, the Magi. Since the fate of the Magi's decline had been set, the nether realm could not be without a master. Fengdu was born and used the merit of opening up the ghost path to rule the rise and fall of the nether realm. The appearance of the nether realm is not completely useless. Perhaps this is the final place for the Magi to settle down. Everything in the world had a chance of survival. The Magi were no exception. And the nether realm was the last chance of survival for the Magi. Chapter 370. According to this calculation, when the netherworld realm appears, the position of the realm lord is not fated with me. At this point, Feng Zichen suddenly discovered a cruel fact. His incarnation of Fengdu was born a little early. At this moment, it was not his turn to be the lord of the netherworld. The netherworld was the world that Pangu had prepared for the Magi. Now that the Magi had not lost their destiny, the position of the Lord of the Netherworld naturally belonged to the Magi. It had nothing to do with Fengdu. When the Magi declined and were convicted of the primordial world, it would be the time for Fengdu to appear and take charge of the Netherworld. No. The Netherworld. It was the Lady of Earth's, the Magi's. Ah. In that case, then let him have an era. As if thinking of something, Feng Zichen suddenly laughed out loud. So what if he gave the position of the Lord of the Netherworld to the Magi? How many years could they hold it for? In the end, everything was still his. Moreover, with the Magi ruling the Netherworld, they could help Feng Zichen resist the pressure of the demon race. It was more convenient for him to hide behind the scenes and plan. Compared to the Yin court that Fengdu presided over, the Yin court that the Magi presided over was the real Yin court. It had the power that even the heavenly court could not defeat. Even if in the future, after the Magi calamity, the Yin court could only have 1% of the current Magi's strength, it would be enough for Feng Zichen to brag about for the rest of his life. From now on, Fengdu will be the Lord of Hell. He will stay in Hell peacefully and wait for the future development. In an instant, Feng Zichen made a decision in his heart. He would make way for the Magi. If things could not be done, then he would not do it to avoid unexpected variables. As for Fengdu, it was better to be his own Lord of Hell. After the Magi calamity, he would come out to take over the Netherworld and clean up the mess left behind by the Magi. Moreover, staying in Hell and being in close contact with the Magi, he could also give advice to the Magi and increase their future vitality. In this way, it could be considered worthy of his identity as a Magi. In the primordial world, the Chaos Fiend God was a legend. Liches were the unsurpassable pinnacle. Any force that could reach 1% of their strength was enough to dominate the primordial world. If he could reach 1/10 of their strength, then destruction was not far away. After much difficulty, they finally removed the two huge mountains that had been pressing down on their heads. How could the saints tolerate the existence of another powerful force like the shaman and demon clans suppressing them? Therefore, if any force had the slightest sign of becoming a force like the Magi and demon clans, what awaited them would be the endless schemes of the saints until they fell apart. The era of the sage. The sage was the supreme being. Their will was the will of the heavens. Even the world had to follow it, let alone all living beings. Forces like the shamans and demons would no longer exist. They were the last glory of the primordial world. After that, they could no longer see each other. However, how could the saints control this world? As the saying goes, as long as the saints were alive, the bandits would not stop. He was the greatest thief in the wilderness. It had been stealing the origin of heaven and earth. To strengthen itself. The weaker the primordial world was, the more disadvantageous it was for all living beings. However, it was more advantageous for the saints. Because the weaker it was, the easier it was to control. Only when the origin of the primordial world was constantly weakening and its level was constantly regressing could the saints better control the primordial world and seek benefits for themselves. The saints hoped that the primordial world would continue to weaken. There was no doubt about this. Everything that happened in the later generations had already proved it. During the era of the shamans and demons, the saints were the highest karmic position in the primordial world. They were the peak of the primordial world. Other than that, they did not have many privileges. The primordial world. It was still under the control of the shamans and demons. It did not have much to do with the saints. During the era of the gods, the primordial world was further weakened. The saints became the rulers of the primordial world. Whoever held the karmic position in the world was determined by their will. The primordial world was completely under the control of the saints. After the god investiture tribulation, the primordial world was shattered again, and its level fell. At this moment, the authority of the saints had increased exponentially. Even the heaven and earth tribulation. They were all affected by them. The so-called journey to the West calamity was like a joke compared to the previous calamities. It was too easy and too simple. It was completely born because of the agreement of the saints. The calamity could be triggered at will. At this moment, the power of the saints could be seen. Speaking of which, although the saints were powerful, they were under the control of the heavenly Tao. They could not be considered free and unfettered. No one would like this feeling of not being able to control themselves. Not to mention the saints who had reached the peak of the primordial world. They would definitely think of a way to get rid of the restrictions of the heavenly Tao. If Feng Zichen was in their position, he would do the same. What? I tried my best and worked hard to cultivate to the saint realm. It was so that I could not be affected by 10,000 tribulations. I could do whatever I wanted and be free. In the end, after I became a saint, I realized that under the control of the heavenly Tao, it was true that I could not be affected by 10,000 tribulations. The rest was fake. They did not even have freedom, let alone being free. Who could tolerate this? What was the purpose of their hard work in cultivating? Therefore, they wanted to change and escape from the control of the heavenly Tao. In order to escape from the heavenly axiom, the best way was to weaken its strength. Only when the heavenly Tao weakened would their resistance not be so powerless and they had the possibility of escaping. Therefore, the primordial world suffered. In order to weaken the heavenly Tao, under the intentional or unintentional calculations of the saints, the primordial world shattered again and again. Before the saints became saints, they might have the determination to develop the primordial world. However, after becoming saints, their hearts must have changed. The feeling of not being able to control oneself was not good. In order to escape for freedom, it was not too difficult to understand that they attacked the primordial world. However, understanding was one thing. This did not mean that Feng Zichen agreed with their actions. Their positions were different. Their perspectives on the problem were naturally different. The saints had indeed benefited from weakening the primordial world. But what about the living beings in the primordial world? When the primordial world retreated, they would be the first to be affected. As the world changed, the cultivation environment became worse and worse. In the past, the celestial immortals who could easily cultivate to become celestial immortals became legends in the future. Such an impact could not be said to be small. Therefore, what right did they have to pay for the benefits that the saints received? This was a great thief, the origin of heaven and earth, the foundation of all living beings. And this was what Feng Zichen wanted to change. The primordial world. Was the primordial world of all living beings? Was not the primordial world of saints? How could he let them take whatever they wanted? Of course, if Feng Zichen wanted to change all of this, he had to at least have the cultivation of primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian to be able to fight against saints. Otherwise he would be courting death. Therefore in the future he still had a long way to go. Chapter 371. After walking through the road to the underworld, crossing the bridge of helplessness, and passing through a vast fog, Feng Zichen finally arrived at the deepest part of the netherworld, where the reincarnation disc was. So powerful. This power can probably easily kill Daluo Jingxian. Before he got close to the reincarnation disc, Hongming Daozhong automatically manifested and hung above Feng Zichen's head. Wisps of Hongming's aura hung down to protect him. Coming into close contact with the reincarnation disc, the feeling he got was completely different from looking at it from afar. The power was even stronger. Just by coming close to the reincarnation disc, before he could do anything, Feng Zichen felt a fatal crisis. If not for the protection of Hongming Daozhong, he would probably be sucked into the reincarnation disc in the next moment and sink into it forever. Feng Zichen had never seen such a powerful treasure in his life. It was far beyond his imagination. For a moment he could not find the right words to describe the greatness of the reincarnation disc. Unfortunately, no matter how good the reincarnation disc was, it was not fated to be with him. It was the treasure of the Hutu. It was a treasure that she had exchanged her life for. I'm really greedy. With a bitter smile, Feng Zichen mobilized the power of his mind and turned it into an invisible sword of wisdom, cutting off all the greed in his heart. Greed. It was his greatest sin. For some reason when he saw good things he wanted to stuff them into his pocket. He could not change it. It was really uncomfortable. Perhaps, when he suffered a big setback in the future, there would be a change. Now, all he could do was to recite the Tao scriptures from time to time to wipe the spirit platform so that he could maintain his clarity and ensure that he would not be disturbed by greed. After the greed was cut off, when Feng Zichen looked at the reincarnation disc again, there was no more greed in his eyes. There was only endless exploration and curiosity. After thinking for a while, Feng Zichen summoned the merit of creation to add another layer of insurance to himself. Then he took a step forward and continued to walk forward. Since he wanted to comprehend the great Tao of reincarnation, the closer he got, the better. However, the closer he got to the reincarnation disc, the greater the influence of the reincarnation power. Worried that Hongming Daozhong could not withstand the pressure of the reincarnation disc, Feng Zichen summoned the merit of creation. It would be funny if he was injured instead of being able to comprehend the reincarnation. The aura of Hongming was purple and glowing purple. They enveloped Feng Zichen's body like purple flowing water, making him look extraordinarily luxurious. Before long, Feng Zichen arrived in front of a huge roulette. It was an illusory wheel that didn't have a real body. It was completely composed of laws and runes. Terrifying power of the universe, the universe, the universe, the universe, the universe, and of all things, the of the universe. Extremely terrifying, and its size twos. Of God of reincarnation. It was a kind of size that he could not describe at all. If he had to make a comparison, he could only say that the reincarnation disk was bigger than the world tree and smaller than the great Tao. It was between the two and was far bigger than the concept. His power spread throughout the entire void, connecting every place in the primordial world. It was as if everything in the primordial world was under his control. Huh? There's no six paths? It seems that the six paths were not born innately, but were created by Hutu. Walking forward, Feng Zichen looked at the reincarnation disk for a moment. He did not find the legendary six paths, so he could not help but speculate. The six paths of reincarnation cared about the fate of all living beings in the primordial world and determined their achievements in the next life. It was very important and could not be decided easily. It was normal that it had not appeared yet. According to Feng Zichen's speculation, the so-called six paths were the six most powerful types in the world. It was with their luck that the reincarnation would evolve further and be more perfect and then be truly born. At the same time, this also deepened the connection between the reincarnation and the primordial world. Reincarnation was the place where life and death operated. It naturally had a close connection with the primordial world. Otherwise, how could the identities of the billions of living beings be arranged? As long as the reincarnation was still in the primordial world, its operation would definitely not be able to bypass the heavenly Tao. That was because all the order of the primordial world and the fate of all living beings were controlled by the heavenly Tao. The heavenly Tao was the supreme ruler of the primordial world. The six paths. It was born from the will of the heavenly Tao. That was also a restriction of the heavenly Tao on Hutu, preventing her from controlling reincarnation as she pleased. That restriction was not to snatch the control of the six paths of reincarnation from Hutu. Instead, it was to suppress the power of the reincarnation disk at the critical moment and prevent Hutu from unleashing her full power. If not, with the six paths of reincarnation disk in hand, how many people in the primordial world would be Hutu's match? As long as Hutu's strength was suppressed to the level of a saint, the other saints would have a way to deal with her and prevent her from saving the Magi. Feng Zichen could roughly guess what that restriction was. Looking at the other treasures of the netherworld, they could not be used after leaving the netherworld. From this, it was not difficult to deduce the restriction of the heavenly Tao on the six paths of reincarnation disk. It was probably the same. The reincarnation disk could not be used after leaving the netherworld. That was in line with the legends of the later generations. In the netherworld, Hutu was invincible. Out of the netherworld she could not. At most, she was on par with saints or even inferior to saints. Six paths. Six paths. Thinking of the six paths of reincarnation, Feng Zichen could not help but fall into deep thought. He wanted to modify the six paths. But the six paths were set by the heavenly Tao. How could he change it at will? Of course, Feng Zichen wanted to change the six paths. That was not because the original six paths were disadvantageous to the human race. On the contrary, after the Khanate era ended, the human race was the biggest beneficiary of the six paths of reincarnation. Other than the Khanate lifeforms, all the races were proud of reincarnating the human race. The human Tao had almost become the Tao of the human race. Feng Zichen's goal was to change the primordial world. Only changing the six paths was the first step to changing the primordial world. If the six paths were different, the future direction of the primordial world would definitely be different. But unfortunately, his strength was not enough to change the will of the heavenly Tao. However, he could increase the weight of reincarnation and force the heavenly Tao or even Pangu to change the six paths rumble. Feng Zichen waved his hand and formed a seal. With the power of the chaos bead, he summoned the world tree from outside the netherworld. Immediately, the world tree broke through the air and descended above the reincarnation. Then, without waiting for the will of the netherworld to react, the roots of the world tree hung down with a bang and tightly entangled with the reincarnation. At the same time, space suddenly shattered and huge cracks appeared, revealing one mysterious world after another. Those were the 3,000 great worlds, the roots of the world tree. They connected the 3,000 great worlds. At this moment, the power of reincarnation rioted. Following those passages, it quickly rushed into the 3,000 great worlds and established a connection with them. Boom, 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 boom. The origin of heaven and earth emerged from the depths of the 3,000 great worlds and surged into the reincarnation, causing his figure to become more solid. Chapter 372. In the sky above the Nether Realm, the will of the Nether Realm that had just appeared noticed this scene. After pausing in the air for a moment, it slowly retreated. His duty was to protect the reincarnation wheel and not let it be hurt. But now, the actions of the world tree were obviously helping the reincarnation evolve. Not only was it harmless, but it was also beneficial to it. The will of the Nether Realm. Naturally, he would not interfere in this matter. Buzz buzz buzz. At this moment, the entire void suddenly shook. Then, a supreme power descended and enveloped Feng Zichen. Heavenly Path. Feng Zichen immediately understood the origin of this power when he felt such a strong oppressive force. This is. The Heavenly Path had descended. It was not the first time Feng Zichen had dealt with the Heavenly Path. Naturally, he was very familiar with his power and would not recognize it wrongly. Obviously. This was the change in reincarnation. It had alarmed the Heavenly Path, forcing him to descend to the Nether Realm to check on the situation. However, Feng Zichen obviously did not expect that the commotion caused by the change in reincarnation was not only this. Perhaps the next change was his real purpose. After the Heavenly Tao descended, another gaze descended and stared at this place. In an instant, the aura in the Nether Realm changed. The oppressive feeling brought about by the descent of the Heavenly Tao had completely vanished and was replaced by a mighty and vast aura. Buzz. At the same time, the merit of creation in Feng Zichen's body began to tremble violently after this gaze descended. It was as if it wanted to jump out of his body and into the embrace of the owner of the gaze. Pangu. Without a doubt. The owner of this gaze was Pangu. Only he could make the merit of creation so excited. Pangu, who was sleeping in the depths of the primordial world, was alarmed by the change in reincarnation. He deliberately separated a wisp of consciousness to pay attention to this place. Although this strand of consciousness was insignificant, Pangu was still Pangu. His power was unimaginable. Just a strand of consciousness was enough to change everything. Pangu's strength was obviously stronger than the heavenly axiom, but under his majesty, not only did Feng Zichen not feel uncomfortable, he even felt more relaxed. Universal love. Because of Pangu's universal love, therefore, all living beings in the primordial world benefited from it. They were unable to perceive his supreme majesty. However, the Heavenly Tao was different. It had to maintain its dignity at all times to let all living beings in the primordial world know that the Heavenly Tao was not to be offended. Samsara, the most important place in the untainted land. The Heavenly Tao was not the only one paying attention to his situation. Even Pangu was paying attention to him. Therefore something happened to Samsara. Both of them descended. Good boy. This commotion is simply too frightening. He knew that if there was a problem with Samsara, it would definitely cause a huge commotion. However, Feng Zichen did not expect the Heavenly Tao and Pangu to descend together. It was not the first time that he had attracted the attention of the Heavenly Tao. He was already used to it. However, this was the first time that he had attracted the attention of Pangu. It was completely out of his expectations. For a moment, Feng Zichen, who had always been bold, could not help but feel a little afraid. He was afraid that Pangu would think that he was meddlesome and teach him a lesson. However, Pangu's consciousness clearly did not have the time to care about Feng Zichen. His attention was all on the reincarnation disc, guiding the connection between the reincarnation disc and the 3,000 great worlds. Be it the reincarnation disc, the 3,000 great worlds, or the world tree, they were all extremely important to the primordial world. They could not be lost. Therefore, Feng Zichen dared to use Samsara to test his plan. With the Heavenly Tao backing him up, he was naturally not afraid of anything. Rumble. Under the guidance of Pangu's will, the reincarnation disc operated violently, constantly guiding the origins of the 3,000 great worlds. At the same time, he also separated his own origins from his body and built small reincarnations in those worlds as his own projections to perfect the evolution of the great thousand great worlds. After a while, although the origins of the reincarnation disc had increased, the speed of growth was extremely slow and almost undetectable. However, the authority of the reincarnation disc had expanded imperceptibly. Its power was stronger than before. According to the original historical trajectory, the reincarnation disc of the 3,000 great worlds formed a system of its own. It was independent of the primordial world and was not bound by the primordial world's reincarnation disk. However, now, Feng Zichen had used the power of the world tree to forcefully connect the origins of the 3,000 great worlds with the reincarnation disk. He had included their reincarnation into the primordial world's reincarnation disk and controlled it. This undoubtedly greatly increased the potential of the reincarnation disk. However, at the same time, it also increased the difficulty of its birth. In order to let the reincarnation disk be born according to the original timing, the heavenly Tao and Pangu had to appear and personally guide the evolution of the reincarnation disk, this time to prevent any accidents from happening to it. The birth of the reincarnation disk was already late enough. It could not be delayed. During the evolution of the reincarnation disk, all the runes that formed it appeared clearly in front of Feng Zichen, explaining the secrets of the path of reincarnation to him without reservation. Just like that, with the help of the heaven-splitting merit and Hongmeng Daozhong, Feng Zichen fell into a deep level of enlightenment and comprehended the true meaning of the path of reincarnation. Fortunately, this was the netherworld and no one could detect his existence. Otherwise, the arrival of the heavenly Tao and Pangu's will at the same time would cause a huge commotion. Unknowingly, 10,000 years had passed, and the reincarnation disk gradually returned to calm. Obviously, with the efforts of Pangu's will and the heavenly Tao, the evolution of the reincarnation disk was completed. Rumble. In the sky, black and yellow merit descended. It was incomparably resplendent. 80% of it landed on the Tree of World and 20% landed on Feng Zichen. However, Feng Zichen clearly felt that with the 20% of merit, there was a stern gaze. It glared at him fiercely, almost suffocating him. This was a warning from the heavenly Tao to him, telling him not to mess around like today. This time, connecting the reincarnation disk to the 3,000 great worlds had huge benefits, but there were also huge risks. If he was careless and the reincarnation disk was damaged, the primordial world would suffer great losses. Therefore, this matter was completed successfully and did not cause any great risks. However, the heavenly Tao was frightened. Didn't he see that even Pangu's will was alarmed? This was something that had never happened in the primordial world. It could be seen that the impact this time was great. Therefore, the heavenly Tao was naturally very dissatisfied with Feng Zichen, who was the culprit. However, increasing the authority of the reincarnation disk was a merit. No matter what Feng Zichen's purpose was, the result was good. The heavenly Tao had to reward him to show its justice. That was why the merit was bestowed. However, in order to prevent similar things from happening in the future, the heavenly Tao still had to warn Feng Zichen to prevent him from making a big mistake. After all, he would not be so lucky every time. After the heavenly Tao bestowed the merit, it slowly disappeared from the netherworld and returned to the heavenly Tao space. However, Pangu's trace of consciousness remained. He hovered in the air for a moment, then suddenly plunged into the reincarnation disk and disappeared. Seeing this, Feng Zichen could not help but be slightly happy. His plan had succeeded. With this trace of Pangu's consciousness, soon after the birth of the reincarnation disk, the one who led the birth of the six paths would no longer be the heavenly Tao but Pangu's consciousness. In Feng Zichen's previous life, the one who led the birth of the six paths was completely the heavenly Tao. As a result, the reincarnation disk created by the Lady of Earth had nothing to do with the Magi. Looking at the six paths, all the races of the primordial world were in it, except for the Magi. This was too much. This was not the way to bully others. But now, everything had changed. The six paths that were led by Pangu's consciousness would definitely be biased towards the Magi. Not to mention that they would take all the benefits, but it was also reasonable to leave a reincarnation for them. No matter what, the Magi were his bloodline descendants. He had personally arranged the six paths of reincarnation. It would not make sense if he did not give the Magi some benefits. Thinking about it, without the heavenly Tao, the six paths would definitely change, the future of the primordial world would definitely change. In that case, wouldn't Feng Zichen's goal be achieved? He would even help the Magi along the way. It could be said that he had killed several birds with one stone. And in this matter, the only one who would lose out might be Pangu. After all, it was a good thing for him to be forcefully awakened while he was recuperating from his injuries. It was very likely that it would cause Pangu's previous efforts to be in vain. Of course, it was also possible that Feng Zichen was thinking too much. Perhaps a wisp of consciousness was nothing to Pangu. However, if it was really nothing, why didn't Pangu's consciousness descend before? Pangu's situation was really puzzling. However, Pangu's situation was not something he should worry about. With Pangu's realm, his every move had a deep meaning. He would not put himself in danger. Thinking about it, Feng Zichen could not help but feel relieved. He just had to worry about himself. Why did he have to worry about Pangu? This was equivalent to an ordinary worker with a monthly salary of 2,000 yuan worrying about whether the world's richest man would not have enough to eat and wear. It was simply ridiculous. He suddenly relaxed. Feng Zichen suddenly realized that something was wrong. He actually had a connection with the reincarnation disc and could control a trace of his power. Although this bit of power was less than 1% of the reincarnation disc, it was still an extremely powerful force. It could do many things and even interfere with reincarnation through it. His heart skipped a beat. Feng Zichen understood the reason. This was the benefit he obtained from increasing his reincarnation authority through the world tree. With his help, reincarnation had obtained great benefits. Naturally, he had to return the favor and thank Feng Zichen. And this bit of authority was the benefit that the reincarnation disc gave him. Haha. I didn't expect that helping the reincarnation disc evolve would have such benefits. What a pleasant surprise. This matter could be said to be completely out of Feng Zichen's expectations. His heart was naturally filled with joy. Now, he might not be able to see the benefits of this bit of authority, but in the future the impact would be great. It would be absolutely convenient to scheme against people. Just as Feng Zichen was happy, a goddess with a sad face was approaching the nether blood sea. Chapter 373. At this moment, Hutu, who had traveled in the primordial world for tens of thousands of years, was finally coming to the nether blood sea. The time for reincarnation and the nether realm to be born had arrived. The closer they got to the nether blood sea, the more broken true spirits there were. When Hutu saw them, the sadder her expression became. Hutu, who was deeply affected by the nature of the earth and was known for her kindness, how could she see such a tragic scene? The suffering of all living beings appeared in her eyes. It was like a blunt knife cutting her heart, making her feel extremely uncomfortable. Sadness could not help but surge out from the bottom of her heart. This emotion reached its peak when Hutu arrived at the nether blood sea. In the depths of the nether realm, Feng Zichen's merit of creation suddenly shone brightly and sent out a will, urging him to leave this place. Hutu, you're here. Inexplicably, Feng Zichen understood the meaning of the merit of creation. Then, without any hesitation, he turned around and left the nether realm, rushing toward Hutu. As Feng Zichen moved, a rain of light danced around him, distorting everything around him. In an instant, he left the nether realm and crossed endless space to Hutu's side. That was the power of time and space. After enlightenment, Feng Zichen could not tell how much he had comprehended about the path of reincarnation. However, his comprehension of the path of time and space, the path of life and death, and other great paths related to the path of reincarnation, had been greatly improved. He had reached the level of path validation. In other words, as long as Feng Zichen wanted, he could rely on the path of time and space, life and death, and other connate paths at any time. His strength had received an unprecedented improvement. Now, Feng Zichen was waiting for the flower of earth to bloom and his cultivation to take a step forward, so that he could reach the perfect realm of Daluo Jingxian and prove the great Taoist priest's path fruit. In this way, even if there were restrictions of heaven and earth, one could not become a sage to be without going through the calamity. However, the great Taoist priest's karmic position had its own magic. Its power was endless, and it had invincible divine might below the saint. Such power was enough for Feng Zichen to roam the primordial world. Fellow Taoist Hutu, what brings you here? Walking quickly to Hutu, Feng Zichen asked softly. All of Hutu's attention was focused on the broken true spirits in the blood sea. She was thinking about how to save them, so her spiritual senses were at their lowest. In addition, Feng Zichen was not hostile at all and he came quietly. For a moment, Hutu didn't notice his arrival at all. Therefore, Feng Zichen's voice suddenly sounded in Hutu's ears, which gave her a shock. Ah, fellow Taoist, why are you here? And you came so quietly. You gave me a fright. Hearing that familiar voice, Hutu was startled at first, then she recovered and couldn't help but complain. As he spoke, he turned to look at Feng Zichen. Fellow Taoist, what are you? With this look, Hutu found that something was wrong. Feng Zichen's appearance had changed, and even his Panga Dao body, which was envied by the Magi, had disappeared without a trace, leaving only a primordial spirit. But his primordial spirit, how did it come about? Hutu, who was extremely familiar with the path of the god fiend, naturally knew its drawbacks. That was, it couldn't refine the primordial spirit. This was a technique that specialized in cultivating the true spirit. Therefore, at this moment, Hudu's heart was filled with confusion. If it weren't for the aura of the god-fiend Tao ancestor on Feng Zichen's body that couldn't be faked, she would have suspected the identity of the person in front of her. Fellow Taoist, I'm fine. This is a connate primordial spirit that I refined by chance in the netherworld blood sea. Seeing the confusion in Hudu's eyes, Feng Zichen explained with a smile. Feng Zichen wasn't surprised that Hudu could recognize his identity. The merit of opening heaven could hide from almost everyone in the primordial world, but it couldn't hide from Hudu, because this was her destined master. Besides, Feng Zichen didn't intend to hide the origin of this incarnation in front of Hudu. Otherwise, how could he carry out his follow-up plan? If he wanted to develop in the netherworld, he couldn't avoid the Magi. It was necessary to reveal his identity to Hudu. Fellow Taoist, you're really a genius. Ha! Wait. Just as she was about to express her admiration for Feng Zichen, Hudu realized that something was wrong. The purple brilliance that enveloped Feng Zichen's body seemed to be the merit of opening heaven in her memory. While sucking in a breath of cold air, Hudu fell into her memories and searched for records about the merit of opening heaven in her inherited memories. This aura can't be wrong. That's the merit of opening heaven. But how is this possible? It's been 2 eons since Father opened the sky. How can there still be merit of opening heaven in the primordial world? After a while, Hudu confirmed the identity of the merit of opening heaven, but this made her feel even more incredulous. The merit of opening heaven should have been distributed after the opening of the sky. Why was there still some left? And it was even obtained by Feng Zichen. Fellow Taoist, is the purple light on your body the merit of opening heaven? Hudu was puzzled, so she asked directly. That's right, this is the merit of opening heaven. Back then, when I was traveling in Mount Buzhou, I was favored by the great Taoist priests and obtained some of his inheritances. This 10% of the merit of opening heaven is among them. Feng Zichen nodded and replied. Everyone in the primordial world knew that he had obtained the inheritance of Pangu. Therefore he said so, there was no problem at all, Hudu wouldn't suspect anything. Of course, Hudu wouldn't suspect anything. After all, in the primordial world, no one had ever heard of anyone who dared to lie in the name of Pangu. Wasn't he afraid that the great god Pangu would blame him? But what they didn't expect was that Feng Zichen dared. Not only did he do it, but he did it more than once. As for the truth of the matter, of course, Feng Zichen wouldn't tell her. Breaking the Hongmeng heaven measuring ruler was not a glorious thing. It was not easy for Pangu to suppress it. He tried his best to cover it up, but it was too late. How could he spread it out with great fanfare? Wouldn't that be causing trouble for himself? Fellow Taoist, what a good opportunity. With this 10% of the merit of opening heaven, thinking about it, fellow Taoist, you are not far from becoming a saint. Sure enough, after hearing Feng Zichen's explanation, Huda didn't have the slightest doubt. Instead, she said in an envious tone. Becoming a saint was not an exaggeration by Hutu. There was a reason for it. As the descendants of Pangu, the 3 pure ones were all saints and enjoyed supreme glory. However, none of the 12 ancestral shamans had attained the Tao, and their fates were even more miserable. Those who died died, and those who were imprisoned. Their treatment could be said to be worlds apart. The reason was that the 3 pure ones each had 10% of the merit of opening heaven, but the 12 ancestral shamans did not. In the past, in the Purple Cloud Palace, the 3 pure ones had 10% of the merit of opening heaven, and they were directly called saints by Tao ancestor Hongjun. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.